Plus, it's the estimate. The real nutshell is getting it all done on one year. If I stress too much about it, then it's just probably. So, whatever this battle, Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's how it's right.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna be so gross. I'm like, ew. It's like where because it was like cold in down my way this morning, so it's like wearing a jumper, but now I've gone outside and I've walked through and I'm like, why did I even think about that? It's so like it's hot. It's
And it's just like so unexpected. It's just like that's cool because it's just very funny. What the hell?
I was like, huh? We're not used to me yet. Leave me alone.
The classrooms do get pretty cold. Like I was super wearing.
Yeah, I remember being here like a year ago in the summer, and like it was so warm outside, but I was in here like in a jumper. It was so cold.
Yeah.
I just had this air come on like already. I was like, yeah, this is great, but I'm freezing now. How's your Ferrari going? How's your Ferrari going?
I can improve that. I feel like I can make mistakes, but I can't figure out where it is until
And that's just like, oh wait, that's what it was.
yeah. So I'm just like definitely improving it, but can't pinpoint that the mistake.
Yeah.
How about you?
I mean, it's not done.
Yeah.
I'm only just getting into one time, but yeah, like I said, I got it as well, but it was just I woke up so late yesterday, and the point that I was messed up on was like just getting the proportions all right and correct. So hard. But then like once I got into the line, like actually getting the structure together, it was fine. So I was just like, oh, it's too bad, but hopefully I put it on there anyway. This is where I am.
I think put it up there and get like that leaves something to that.
Yeah. Because then I can at least look at the different so yeah, which is good.
Yeah. I do my thing for self to the disease.
Or even I like to forget about it because I'm so behind in the drawing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I must bring it I'm just where I am. And so I think in the end, with my Ferrari, I ended up doing like an energy model off of the 3D printing website. And it's like you can set it to any angle, so any sort of perspective you can set it to that, which is so helpful. My partner came up with the idea, and I was like, I was halfway through it, and I'm sitting here like, I can't do this. And he's like, I was on that website. I'm like, why didn't you say anything?
I'm like, oh, I'm useless. How does this look like?
Looks like I can't. Just like, I should what it ended up looking like. So the 3D model was like, I had it like kind of up here. So I was watching for, it's not completely the same, but it's very similar. So it's like the body and the shape is very similar. So I can work with that. But like the way they have it, you can pose it at any sort of angle that you're working with. I Vespa would have been really good for that. I think I'm gonna end up trying Vespa and the horses. I'll do it during the break when like cat stuff.
Yeah.
That's actually such a good idea. I know, it's like, why didn't you say anything? I've been struggling for like 4 hours now. It's like, is it something to be done? I was like, yeah, 4 hours tops, this is like, it took me about 8 just to get this down.
And like I died inside and like
It was like, yeah, Tim, this is what I have it scrapped, but have it. Merry Christmas. Like, most of it I kind of just, I'm like, I'm not really guessed, but like, gone with the shape that I've got here and then just kind of modified it a little bit. And I just hope that I got stuff right. Because I didn't take very many measurements. I kind of just went with, oh yeah, this looks fine, and I used the guide drawing on appropriate, and I was like, okay, this is working, like, I just went with it. Which is probably a bad thing to do, but here I am.
I need something similar for my characters. I'm not very Mixer. I've been using it for a while. Like it's not only for animations, but you can post them. I think. Yeah.
Ooh,
I'll just use this one.
so cool. So it's like supposed to like different body shapes and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I think you can. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So I've used this a lot.
Let me write that down. After that, because I have a lot of characters actually.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot faster for me.
Yeah, fair enough. What did we do in? No, I'm trying to think. I think that's stupid. Was there one point when we did just like? I think I missed that completely.
We do legs, but it's only the whole body. But I think that was like. Oh, you said just don't worry about
Very long.
Yeah.
I always thought that I was struggling with this, but I'm gonna have to go back and watch the classes regardless. Yeah. And just be like, stage 1, stage 2, this is what I'm focusing on for like 4 weeks.
Yeah, explain what it's a secret.
You know, I got her and did it on myself. Like, still, like, it was different.
Yeah. I was like, I had a really good diagram the first time. First time we were kind of introduced to it, I was like following along with his guidelines and everything, and it looked so precise. But then I go do it by myself, and I feel like I just can't get it. Oh my god, it's Sam. Hi. I like the show.
What did you kind of do that?
He's so funny. I love it.
What's the dark?
That's so cool.
Like, go back.
And like, it doesn't matter how many times I do it. I just never feel like it's so hard. But then it's got like multimedia. I got an extension on that and I've overdone the extension. I'm still not done.
That's not good. Like, I ended up submitting all
doing
my
my
stuff, except for my typical video. Like I said, it's a work in progress.
Oh, just for the
What was I thinking? Just for making a video. Like, I thought it was going to be.
what were you doing for the trip?
I was doing like a big lemon, so like I cut it and then just it. It's like one whole lemon. It's like I almost got it, but like I just submit it how it is.
Yeah,
It's
just
close enough.
I'm having trouble with like the animatic because I'm just like, how do I even process like the storyboard, mood board, all that kind of stuff is fine. Motion graphic, I finished that. It took me fucking ages. And then the trick film, I was like debating between 2 ideas, so I'm like still working on that. But the animatic is what's stumping me right now.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what?
Major
It's pretty okay. Like I've got the documents in place and I've got references and stuff. It's just actually picking what kind of stuff that I'm doing. So it's like I have an idea of what I'm doing background on for my game. So like I've got a few different ideas. So I'm thinking like an arcade, a hallway, a classroom, make stuff. I'm doing it on Pixel. You texted me. Love it. I love it. But I feel like I'm just getting it in my head. Like I'm getting too distracted and being like, oh, but what about characters? Like, you know, what's the personality? And I'm just like, no, you're doing background drama.
Or years, but like what shape can write down
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing with those YouTubers where it's like maps. So I really want to do that, but I know I can't.
Because like I think more so my thing is turning into, I was like, oh yeah, it's just like an RPG, but like with social interactions rather than combat. But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, maybe the idea that I have in my head is just a visual. But I'm not sure. So I'm like, it's a mix between both, but I'm not sure which to solidify on.
Yeah.
But like, that's why I picked the background up. Because I'm like, oh, you know, I don't have to really do too much thinking about it. And then that means I've already got some assets there and that kind of thing. Like, it's not very in depth. It's just doing the background. Yeah. But then it's like, I need context.
Yeah. Because when you hear Shay talking about context, like, there should be like a scene more smart. Every time like Shay mentions context, I was like, mentions something function or something. I'm like,
I would feel like why do I want to make like that's just fucking idea. I want to make a class window for either James class or David's class and be like, every time one of them says this or this happens or this happens, I'm gonna, you know what, during the break, I just want to look, class window, here we go. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm kind of behind like everything. I'm just hating knowledge. So I really wanted to get to digital painting. It's like,
I'm just being like, yeah, I'd rather focus on
and I feel like boot camp's like really important. So I've been wanting to focus mainly on boot camp, which is why I've neglected. I've been focusing on boot camp and character design because I know that it's going to go in my presentation. So I'm like, I can get these as scratched up as possible. I'll be fine. But then also I've neglected figure drawing, and I'm like, shit, I kind of need figure drawing.
I like that.
Like, it's so now the thing I'm paranoid about is whether I like actually close my roller door. Like I just had this feeling in the back of my mind that I haven't closed my roller door. It's like, because I was leaving the house, I was in a rush, and I'm like, closing my roller door.
I'm gonna like every time, yeah.
It's like paranoid, so I'm like, I'm trying to take the papers and be like, hey, can you shut my roller door?
It's literally just like random.
But it's like, are they gonna pick up? Are they gonna know what I'm talking about? Like, I know, I think it's so weird asking, hey, can you just like check if my roller door is shut? But like, oh my god,
Hey everyone. Before Tim gets here and we start ranting about ellipses again for the next 3 hours, do you guys, it's the last class, so do you guys have any questions about like presentations or anything like that? Everyone's all professionals? Is there a 15-minute time chunk on the thing? It'll be like 10 minutes and then, yeah. So it'll be the same, it's just we normally just set that just so there's time for questions and that kind of stuff at the end. So it should, does it say on there? It should say how long it is in the, what does it say, 10 minutes? It's whatever it says in there, so yeah. That's all good. And like the main question I'm getting is like, oh, do I have to show all of my work from the whole semester? And it's like, no, because we've already graded that. So you only need to show weeks 8 to 12. If you've gone back and done stuff, then yes, show us. But if you're just like, I got my grade and it was 73 and I'm happy with that and haven't done any more, then you don't need to show us because that's just wasting time. Yeah. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Yep, 8 to 12 and anything you missed or anything like that. Also, just remember, because I do get a few questions like this, and it's mostly from first years because they're new and haven't done it before, is like, it is totally okay to be like, if you were sick for like 2 weeks because you had like the flu or COVID or whatever, right? But if you were sick, it's okay to be sick, and we don't you just don't have to do that 2 weeks of stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you got a medical certificate and you were actually crook and things, it's fine. Like we don't, so it's all good. We're not like Nazis where it's like you have to get everything done, and if you don't, you will fail, and you never be an artist ever again. So yeah. Right? So if you're actually crook and you got a certificate and stuff, just take that week or 2 weeks or whatever happened as you don't do anything for that. Yeah. So yeah, so because I think lots of people are like, yeah, but I was sick for week 2 and week 3 and I didn't show that in my grading, and it's whatever. It might change your grade by 1%. I don't know, who cares? Why waste 20 hours of your life trying to fix that up? You know what I mean? I'd rather you focus on what you're doing now and try and do a better job of that. You know, say for example you got a 70 for your checkpoint, but you really wanted to get a distinction. I'd focus on trying to get an 85 for your weeks 8 to 12. That's more beneficial than the other way around. Does that make sense? Then going back. That's how I would approach it. Does anyone online have any questions at all about presentations or anything? Does that cover most stuff?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
So I've got
We got a question.
242 and 2109. Is multimedia included in the presentation? I'm going to assume
No. So multimedia has its own presentation slot or whatever you guys meant to do. I don't know because I'm not in that class. What are you guys meant to do for that? You just hand it up? You just submit it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So would it be figure drawing would be in with boot camp and that kind of thing as well?
Sorry?
Figure drawing would be grouped in with boot camp?
Yep. That's half of your grade for boot camp. So yeah. So yeah, the stuff you do with me and Tim and your boot camp stuff, 50% of your grade is for your Ferraris and 50% of your grade is for your figure drawing. So yeah, just put all of that together. The question was, do you have to present 2109 in those classes? And my answer was no. I think you just upload for those ones, and you just do whatever Shane and Jay. Who teaches that one? Is it Shane and Jason? Yeah. So you just do whatever Shane and Jason been telling you to do. Yeah. So yeah. Any other questions before Tim gets here? Sorry, what? Sorry?
In terms of adding commentary in each presentation,
Yep. So Cheska was just saying, is it just normal how we talk about the slides? Yep. Yeah, just normal. Just, explain what you've been doing. And yeah, just remember, don't start by I did creature design, and for creature design, we had to design a character that's da-da-da. And we had to do 3 thumbnails, and we had to do... Really? I was telling Duncan this the other day, he's laughing. I'm like, yes, we know that for the 100th time. In boot camp, I had to draw 64 ellipses and I get yelled at and so don't do it like that. Just talk about what you did. Does that make sense? In creature design, here's my thumbnails I did, here's my final product. Here's my thing. Yeah. Rather than telling us what the class was about. Cause we may know what it's about. Any other questions? These are all good questions. So if you got anything this, there's no dumb questions. I'll give you a dumb answer, but there's no dumb questions. And I did this. I will say this, and I think Duncan and Joe may have been telling you guys this as well. With Brian's figure drawing class, don't stress if you haven't got if you got 18 done of the 20. That's not what we're kind of grading. Does that make sense? We're not going to be going through and being oh, you did 16 hands instead of 24 or whatever Brian's telling you to do, right? It's more about how well you did the hands. So just concentrate on trying to do a good job rather than trying to do if you find the quantity a bit difficult, it's all good. I guess that's what I'm getting at is the sick thing. We don't care if you've missed like a few things. Like, I mean, if you want to progress and be like a world famous like artist, right, in the industry, then yes, you should do all the stuff, right? Because that's how you're going to become that person. Yep. But if, you know, we just want you to be improving. So even if you got like 4 hands done, but you do a really good job of that, I'd rather you do that than do 20 that are just like, I just got 20 done and didn't care about the 20. Does that make sense? I'd rather do 5 that you care about and learn from than do 20 shit ones, because you're not getting better doing 20 shit ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in conclusion, you want like quality or quantity, basically.
Yeah.
With anything.
With anything. Yeah. Always. Because that's how you get good. Yeah. It's like, just remember like back to first year when you do the 100 trees, Samuel. Right? Is like, you can do 700 trees, but you can also not learn anything from doing 700 trees, right? I'm not saying you didn't learn anything, Samuel. I'm just, you get the point though, yeah?
Had other motives.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but you get the point, right? Like someone could do 20 trees and really learn stuff about like drawing with the form and doing an awesome job. And you could do 100, but they're throwaway and you don't care about them and you don't learn anything from it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I was telling the first years the other day, like, got a student, Georgia Kolinak, and her stuff's like awesome, and she's a family friend of ours, and she used to live at my house, right? As when she was a student, she was my boarder, and you know, she was like, look, it took until 3rd year for her to be like, she thought everything was like homework, like I had, like, you guys are making me do this. And then she had this like eureka moment where she was like, look, if I was in year 10 and you told me that I was going to be at this place, CDW, and you told me that all I had to do for like school was just draw stuff every day. That's all I had to do. She'd be like, this would be the greatest day of my life. But then when I got to CDW in Flinders, like all of a sudden I thought of it as homework, you know, and she was like, it took till 3rd year to be like, no, I'm just meant to do this for like the rest of my life. Does that make sense? Like, I do this to get better at doing art. Like, it's never going to stop. Yeah. And she was like, oh, right. And, you know, like she was living in my house. I would talk all the time, like every day I'd be like, hey, go on, Georgia, like, what's going on? You know, and even for something like that, it took a long time for her to like get that concept. So yeah, it's sort of the same stuff I'm talking about with Brian's class, right? Where it's like, it shouldn't be like, I've got to do 20 because I'm going to get in trouble with Brian, right? That should not be your mentality. Does that make sense? You should be like, I've got to do 20 because I want to become a famous artist. Yeah. Different mentalities, right? Same thing with this Ferrari and all this kind of stuff. It's all like, it's the mentality that you have, you know? People always ask me like, should I start again? I'm like, I don't know. Do you just want to keep drawing shit Ferraris? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's the mentality of it. It's like the way you think about it. And like, if you think about it differently, it's not like work. It's just improvement and getting better. It's just like training, you know? So yeah. Anyway, hey Tim, sorry, I was talking about presentations, and then guess what? I started going into a rant about ellipses. So anyway,
No, that sounds good. I was listening. Yeah, I don't know much about that because I never went to uni or anything. I went to TAFE for like a bit, and then I quit because it wasn't for me. But yeah, so I'm like I don't know. I'm not a good person to ask. I hated homework. Yeah, but it sounds like Brian's giving people some work there. I feel like a lot of people.
He is. Pardon my French, but he is fucking smashing people.
Yeah. He's got the art center.
It is art
attitude,
center,
right?
isn't it,
Just
guys? It's awesome. Like, it's super good because I'm scared. I see the class and I'm scared. Yeah, but it's like I said. If you guys can do like 30% of it, is like you were just getting so much more information than Tim and I ever got on this stuff. Like, it will just make you like a professional artist, right? Like, if you do that, you'll just be forever good at like drawing the figure, because Brian's knowledge of that is like there's like 3 people in the world that have knowledge like he does, right? Yeah, it's like Kevin Chen, Brian Lee, and like there's another like kick-ass instructor that I know, Dan Holland. and guess what? They all came from Kevin, and then all those guys came from like Mark Westermore. So Mark Westermore taught Carlo Aureliano, Charlie Wen, Kevin Chen, like all those guys, and then Kevin started the school like Mark Westermore, and then Kevin's like started teaching all these people, and now there's all these people that have this information that has gone down. And like Carlo told me, like Carlo Aureliano, he's like, you can literally trace like Kevin's and Mark Westermore's lineage back to Da Vinci. He's like, I can tell you where it went from Da Vinci to next artist, 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 to Kevin Chen. And then like Kevin Chen to, and then the internet comes along, and it just like, yeah, because Tim and I were speaking about this before, like there was this time where like Art Center just had all this information that no one knew. It was like this black ninja magic school, you know, where like you would go there and train like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, and like you'd come out and you'd be like this like insanely good artist. No one knew how it was happening. But then the internet came along, and basically Scott Robertson just like changed all that. Like Noman DVDs just changed all that like overnight. All of a sudden this information. So Feng Zhu started it. Like Feng Zhu started the DVDs with Alex Alvarez. So Alex Alvarez like owns Noman, and like Feng kind of helped him start all that. And now Feng owns the school in Singapore as well. Yeah, and then Scott Robertson came on board because Scott was Feng's teacher. And if you guys don't know, like, because these stories are like amazing, right? So Feng got a job on Star Wars when he was 19. So he went to Art Center for like a year and a half, and they got picked up on Star Wars and worked with Doug Channing. I don't know if you guys know Doug Channing, but he's literally like the, you know, the OG of like Star Wars stuff. Not the original OG, because all those guys were like,
no, the new stuff. Yeah,
all like the
and he was
but
like,
you guys think of that as old, so like Phantom Menace, right? So we're talking Phantom Menace. So Doug Channing was like the art director and all that.
If you were around at that point in time, every single one of you would have the Episode 1 Star Wars art book. And it was like, holy shit, what is this? Who are these people? How is this stuff done? It was like the best art book that had ever been made, right? You know, and there were all these people, you know, contributing to it. And yeah, it was kind of like just next level. I feel like, you know, that anyone who wanted to be doing anything concept design was like looking at all those people.
Yeah, and that was right around that time all that stuff blew up. But like, yeah, and it was sort of like, you know, Feng, Kang Lee, Charlie Wen, Carlo Aureliano, they all came out of Art Center like at the same time. Yeah, and they've just all gone on to do all their own, like, yeah. So Carlo started Blizzard like on World of Warcraft. So he like designed all the original characters in like World of Warcraft. You know, Kevin started the school, right? Charlie Wen designed Kratos, designed Thor, designed like all of the Marvel characters. Ryan Meinerding is art director now, but Charlie designed them. And then and who else did I say? Kang. And then you got Kang Lee, who's just like a fucking genius.
Doing
just,
weird stuff that
like,
Kang does. Yeah, just making games and
he paints so fast. He like works on all these movie projects and never shows anyone any of his stuff. And then he makes his own games by himself and then sells them all. And he's like, just makes fucking millions of dollars, right? Like, he just like comes up with these little game prototypes. He just puts it online and someone buys it and he like never works on it ever again. He's like, I don't care about that thing. And then he like does another one and he's just like, what is going on, Kang? It's just, yeah, he's like crazy Asian. It's just like those stuff he does. Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, but now you guys have got Brian Lee.
Again, like a lot of people look at those styles though, right? And like, you know, why do these things look the same, and why do we kind of always point to those same artists? And I think it is because, again, there's people who are essentially working in that tradition, and a lot of these things were passed down in ateliers. So that's why, you know, Simon's saying that you can trace the lineage back to, and I think it was a lot of those sort of golden age illustrators, like who would it, like the
Leyendecker and
the Brandwin School and the Howard Pyle and Dean Cornwell, and you can see, like, if you go look at Dean Cornwell,
Cornwell, it's just amazing
art, and and you know, you can kind of see there is a tradition of structural drawing and you know, sort of a mix of sort of structure with artistry, I guess. And yeah, people are sort of still working in that tradition. And that's kind of, I guess, because Simon went to CDA and sort of CDW was based on CDA to a certain degree, although it's very different now to what it was, originally. But that's why, do you know what I mean? Because we're kind of trying to take that same style of teaching and stuff like that and do it here. That's why it's sort of done in a particular way, and why we sort of teach the perspective and do all that. It's not the only way to learn art, right? There are some schools that operate a bit differently, that maybe are a bit more sort of illustration, like capital A art focused, and maybe are more like to, I think what's the other one that often feeds Disney, that a lot of the
Cal Arts.
Yeah, I think Cal Arts is like probably maybe a slightly different sort of vibe. But again, these are traditions of art education, essentially, right? It's the same thing. Like if like a lot of the figure drawing stuff that you see comes out of like Watts Atelier, right? And you see like Proco, right, on the internet, and it's like, yeah, where did he study? Right, he studied at Watts, right?
Yep.
You learn everything he knew from those guys, right? So there's traditions. People are often sort of thinking, like, oh, there's just this person's doing this. I'm like, oh, they're just studying this. It's like most of the time, the people you see where there are those strong traditions and stuff, they're studying at a very specific school, and that school is working with a specific tradition that, you can trace back for hundreds of years. And they're a bit of a different attitude and a bit of a different sort of style, even though, a lot of the stuff is the same. But that's, that sort of tradition of learning that I think you need in a school. You can't just kind of like make stuff up, you know what I mean? Because the ethos needs to kind of fit together. So, like, don't just imagine there's people, there's just this Proco guy on the internet and he's just like really good. It's like, no, in a specific.
Yeah, and he teaches like the Loomis method, which Andrew Loomis learnt from other people and went to like a school to learn how to do that. Like
YouTube videos though.
Sorry, you just dropped out for a bit there, Tim.
Yeah.
And Loomis didn't make up the Loomis method. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not something he just came up with. Yeah. It was.
He probably personalized it to a little
That's
bit,
what he
right?
did.
Because you've got the Riley method and the
Yeah.
Loomis method, and again, all those people would have been studying, I think, under Bridgman.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Like,
That's
yeah.
yes.
So, yeah. So again, it's worthwhile knowing this, right? It's not like it's not like people just come up with these things, right? But people put their own spin on it, and that is valuable, right? Bridgman. The Loomis method is slightly different, but the general idea, the constructive sort of drawing and understanding your sort of tonal arrangements and reflected light and breaking it down like that, is something that's been around for ages. I'm just going to swap my connection, so I'll probably drop out in a sec.
All good. And what was I going to say? So you guys know, like, because you probably have no idea about this, is that, so like Tim said, I went to Concept Design Academy, which is Kevin Chen's school, and I did that in 2008. And when I went there, I was the first international student that Kevin had ever had at the school. And I didn't realize at the time, but that's probably why CDW exists now, is that. So Kevin kind of took me under his wing because he was like, holy shit, there's this guy coming from Australia to like do the course, and like, oh shit, what do we do? So like his wife just literally would like do everything for me and, go shopping for me and do this stuff. And like I went to Kevin's house heaps and all this and I just thought, oh yeah, this is cool. Like this is just how it kind of goes, and no big deal. And I went to this will give you an idea of kind of the like insane shit that happened. Is like I went to Comic-Con and I was wearing Charlie Wen was meant to be going with Kevin, but Charlie pulled out last minute. So Kevin's like, I've got a spare ticket. Do you want to come to Comic-Con? I'm like, yes. And so he gives me the ticket, and on the thing it's Charlie Wen. So I was there as like Charlie Wen. And then we go and meet Stan Lee, right? And because like Charlie's with Stan Lee and like working with Stan Lee, and Kevin's like, because Kevin was working at Marvel as well, and Kevin's like, "G'day, Stan, how you going?" and stuff, and and he's like, he looks at me and he goes, "You don't look like Charlie," and I'm like, "No, I'm not Charlie." I'm like, "Hi," and like got to shake Stanley's hand and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was like not too bad. So then when I did, because I had no idea, like, because this is kind of like, it's not pre-internet, but it's like sort of pre-internet, like it's pre-internet of how we know it now. So when I went there, I was just like, I'm just going to do every class because like I'm going there. So I just do every class. So I did 8 classes. So I did 8 classes a week and I just tried to do it. And it was like super ridiculous. And by the end, I just couldn't do all the work. Like it was just insane, right? And anyway, so nowadays, like when whoever goes to CDA, there's like this folklore of this guy that did 8 classes and like came over from overseas and did 8 classes and stuff. And I've spoken to people and they're like, yeah, there was this guy that did all this. And I was like, yeah, that was me. I'm like, oops. So, but what happened is that because I kind of got this personalized experience. So everyone I've ever spoken to before, so everyone that's come from Australia and gone now to CDA and stuff, they just have like a completely different experience. Like no one's going to Kevin's house and all this, like I used to play with kids and like do all sorts of stuff. So what happened is that when I came back to Australia, I started working for a while and was just working and had no intention of starting school or anything. It wasn't like I went to CDA and then was like, came back to Australia and was like, okay, I'm going to start like a school. Like that wasn't how it happened. I was just like, I wanted to get into video games. So I was working in the industry for 4 or 5 years, and then I was like, okay, it'd be really cool because once again, sort of like no one else was like, I was the only person that kind of did it, that went overseas and did all this kind of stuff. So what I thought was like, why don't I run a workshop where we could get the guys from overseas like to come over to Adelaide and like do a workshop. So that was the first CDW thing in 2010. And
you ran a workshop at your house.
I did run workshops at my
Before
house.
that.
Yeah, that's going back even further. Yeah, in my dining
Perhaps
room.
even further.
Yeah, and then we ran this workshop, and so the first thing I did was like I literally like rang up Kevin like on the phone, and I said, "Hey Kevin, like, do you want to come out to Australia and like do a workshop and stuff?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course. Like, I'll do anything you want to do, Simon. Like, just let me know and I'll be there." And once Kevin said yes, then I was like, "Hey Carlo, would you like to come out and do a workshop?" Kevin's coming, and he's like, "Kevin's coming? Okay, I'll come out and do the workshop." And like, so it just built momentum from there, right? And I think none of that would have happened without, that kind of like sort of just weird sliding doors kind of moment. So yeah, it was kind of pretty interesting. Yeah. So anyway, and now I'm best mates with all those people. So whenever I go to things, you go to Marvel events, and it's just all this kind of crazy shit that you get to do, which is very fun. But it all started from there. So yeah, but it's really cool to have that kind of lineage kind of running through.
Yeah. Also, I'd say though, like to your credit, I would imagine that again, you came over. You seem dedicated, and I know you would have put in like 100%. And I think that does inspire people, right? I often say to sort of artists that, people often imagine that if you're sort of looking at, like if you are like not at someone else's level, right? They're going to sort of look down on you or sort of say like, oh, you're not as good as me or whatever. But I think the thing is that especially people in that sort of the art center lineage, is that they really respect hard work. And so if you feel like you're really like dedicated and you are really trying, do you know what I mean? People have a lot of respect for that, So, and I think that does open doors. You know what I mean?
I didn't kind of explain it all. So like, Tim, I'm going to swear. So just, if you don't like swearing, just turn your ears off. But like, Tim knows that I'm a crazy motherfucker. Right, like Tim knows. We've known each other for a long, long time, and he knows that I'm like insane. Like I'm literally batshit crazy. So when I went to CDA and I did 8 classes a week, I was working full time at the same time. Yeah. So no. So for 3 months I worked until 3 a.m. and then I woke up at 8, and I just did that every day for 3 months. And I had one child at home in Adelaide and another one on the way. Yeah. So when people say to me they can't get their homework done, I'm like, cool, good. Yeah. So, yeah. But I like, do I recommend that to people? No. Did I like die from the experience? No. It was like the greatest experience of my life, right? But, and you can do that. It's probably not sustainable for years and years on end, you know, and I'd have
Probably
times
not.
where I'd like, you know, there would always be like one day a week where I'd like sleep, you know, like it'd be probably Saturday or whatever, and I'd, just crash, whatever, 8 o'clock or something, then wake up at 10 o'clock the next day or something. But then I had classes 7 days a week, like it was 7 days a week. So it was,
Yeah, because again, you weren't thinking like, oh, I'll
And-
just space this out or whatever. It's
Tim
just
knows
like,
I'm
oh,
not
there's
making this
classes
stuff
on
up.
every day. That must mean you're meant to take a class every day.
So anyway, so you can do it. You can do it and you can get good. Anyway, that's it. Hey, Tim, William just said he's feeling a bit sick. So he said, could you do
Yeah,
feedback on his first?
I did get his. Let's I looked at it quicker, but I didn't actually start critiquing it. So I've got that one. I think I pretty much got them all now. So we'll drag them into the thing, and we'll check that out soon. For sure.
One last rant. Like, I will just never forget. I will never forget. This like always just stuck with me. Like, I was doing a class with Carlo Aureliano, and he was like, so at the time, you know, like, whatever, it doesn't matter what basketball team or whatever, but he was like, so let's just say, like, you know, let's go, the most famous team and best team at the moment is the Lakers, all right? Whatever, I'm a basketball nerd, so they're not, but... but he was just like, in class, he was like, Simon, I am trying to get you onto the Lakers team. That's what I'm trying to do, right? He's like, I'm not mucking around. Like, I want you to be good enough to get onto that, like, LA Lakers NBA team. And that's why they want you to work really hard. Because, like, the bar's not just like, I want you to do some little freelance illustrations in Adelaide and for, like, $4 an hour. Like, that's the bar over there is like, I want you to be a freaking superstar. Like, that's the bar. That's what everyone's trying to, like, do. And that's what we're trying to do here as well. And, like, it's not... We don't like smash it as much as we probably could, because we do put this inside of a university course, right? So like we kind of get in. Tim and I have got in trouble before for giving like
doing
long
too
time
much
ago.
work.
Long time ago,
Making people cry.
We used to, we used
that
to
wasn't good.
really make people's hands bleed. Got in trouble, and we probably also understood that it's probably not the best way of doing things. Like, I actually don't think the art center is probably the best way of making artists, but you know, we've kind of got that bar too. Like, we want you guys to be like, to be able to compete in that international area of artists. You know, we want you to be able to be on that front page of ArtStation. You know what I mean? Like, we want you guys to be that good, and we know like what it takes. Tim won't tell you this, but every time Tim posts something up, it's on the front page of ArtStation. Right? So like, we want, and we've got students that are like that too. We've had students that, you know, have gotten so awesome that like they post something up and it's like boom, you know, instant, you know, front page of ArtStation, stuff like that. So like, that's what we're aiming for, and that's why we kind of make it hard. And I think like the stuff that Brian Lee is showing you guys is like just amazing that you're learning that. And it's going to be hard. It's lots of hard work, but just keep persisting. And if you keep persisting and just growing and stuff, like you'll get better, and you'll be able to do it for a job. And that's what we want. We just want you guys to be like happy in your life, you know, that you can do this stuff. And all the instructors are the same. I know like people always crack the shit to me about like Peter Young. Oh, he's so harsh and all that, but like he just wants you to do this for a job. You know what I mean? Like,
I love that
that's
Peter
all
is
of
the
the guys,
harsh
you know,
one.
like David, he will yell at you about stuff. It's like they're just trying to help you, you know, to be able to do this, to have the opportunities that they've got, you know, like that's what I think is so cool. Like,
Yeah, totally. No, I think it's like, I mean, the way I view a lot of these things is, like, for instance, again, I took a TAFE course, right? And it was the advertising and graphic design TAFE course, because it was either that or the course I think Simon took. And you know, it was quite hard to get into, and it was well regarded, but it obviously wasn't illustration based, and it wasn't for me. But people there were really trying. I could see what they were trying to do. It just wasn't for me. But I do sort of appreciate, like, there's a lot of things I kind of learned there about sort of clients, working with clients, running sort of business, because advertising graphic design is very business oriented, right? It's about serving clients and stuff like that. The best way to think about it is, like, again, like we're doing that sort of style of teaching. It might not be 100% for you, you know what I mean? Like, we're trying to balance it, but I think the reality with ArtStation is that Art Center is that it kind of works really well for some people, and I think it works for people who have that kind of attitude, right? The Carlo Aureliano sort of attitude, where they're kind of like they like the challenge and the aggressiveness of it, and the fact that you're kind of really testing yourself. You know, not everyone functions that way. And I think it is really hard to, you can't make something that's kind of for everyone. So the best thing is to sort of understand, like, this is kind of what we're teaching, and this is kind of how we're doing it. And if you want to do this stuff, like, this is kind of how it's done, right? And yeah, I feel like if you kind of know that, then, as you move forward, at least you can kind of say, well, I went to this school and, I got that type of education, right? And it kind of is what it is. And I think, yeah, it's important to kind of understand where it sort of fits in the grand scheme of things, right? But because I think the thing with CDW is often people are just kind of coming in because they're like, I want to do a course about drawing, whereas at Art Center, everyone's like, I'm going to Art Center to get smashed, right? And I'm spending all this money, and I'm gonna, again, I'm going for the Lakers, you know what I mean? Whereas I think a lot of people are just like, I just wanted to draw cool manga stuff, right? And I tick this box. Which again just shows you, how good it is to have, public education like that, where that is possible. Yeah, it is what it is, right? But you have to understand again that the stuff that we're teaching and why we're teaching it is quite specific. And the thing I would say is that often when, if you're talking about the students who, do get jobs, the one thing I think people have said is that they're not surprised by the level of work that they're required to do at their job, or like the quantity of work that they're required to do at their job. And to me, that is the most important thing. The real danger with a lot of educational stuff that kind of is not as, I guess, sort of challenging, right? That it's sort of trying to make it like, quote unquote, easier or more manageable. And I think this is probably the curse of what the sort of education that we went through a bit, Simon. Although my course was very much like this, it was sort of, I think there was like 100 students in first year, 50 students in second year, and like 20 in third year. Mm-hmm. And it was that. It was like, they were like, that's what it is, because we know, like third year was basically like graphic design incubation, right? You were working with sort of not real clients, but you were really building a folio, and they were just like, we're not going to let everyone in. Yep. And that's just kind of how it works, right? So that was kind of good, but a lot of those courses, they just kind of keep saying, yeah, cool, yeah, cool, bye. And you're like, oh, okay, and they're like, oh, yeah, sorry, bye, you're done now, you graduated, see you later. They just kind of smile at you through the bulletproof glass, right? And the reality is, you're not prepared, and you don't understand what the actual job is that you've been training for. And I think that's where, like, that's to me is the number one thing that I don't want to have, is like, even if people are like, screw Tim and Simon, those guys are assholes. I'm like, yeah, but at least we told you like what that kind of, like, the type of people who are going for these jobs, right, is people like, again, people like these sort of Art Center grads who are super dedicated. It's people from, sort of lower socioeconomic countries in, the European region, right? Like sort of Russia and these kind of ex-Soviet states who are like, they are really fucking dedicated. Like they are gonna get some work with these international companies, because if they can get even low-end freelance work, that is a huge thing for them. Do you know what I mean? Because the income disparity there is massive. And there's tons of these places like that where you are competing against people who are like, if they don't do this, they're going to earn like $20 a week. You know what I mean? Versus if they can do this, they earn like, you know, $1,000 a week. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, that's their motivation. So, you know, you got to understand, it's just not the type of industry that you can sort of be in and just be a bit like, it's kind of okay. And again, there are lots of jobs that aren't quite as competitive, right? Like production level jobs or whatever. But again, you just have to understand that, you know, even people who I feel like are in production level jobs are very dedicated. You know, they're spending their whole time doing this. And it's important to understand that, you know what I mean? But like, again, everyone else is being trained by people like Brian. And people are like Brian. The rest of them are like that, you know what I mean? And so like, you know, often it is it is like a very, these industries are very sort of intense. The industries themselves are very competitive and intense, right? So you're working for video game companies that are in this highly competitive market where there's a lot of money to be made and it's very easy to fail. You know, you can put all this effort in and still the 12-year-old kids are just like, I don't like this game. I don't like this movie. It's crap, you know? And it's like, oh my God, do you have any idea how much work went into that game? Just like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours and crunch time and people working all day, you know? So the whole thing is very competitive, you know? It's not, that's just kind of the people you're going to be around are a little bit like that anyway, right? So again, if you just understand that and you get sort of jobs, you know, doing that, then at least you just understand, like, oh yeah, I sort of get this. And I think a lot of people who have graduated and gotten a job, which again is not everyone, right? It is still very challenging to do all those things. Yeah, I think a lot of people have kind of understood that, like, oh, you know, I'm not sort of completely, that was from yesterday, I'm not completely overwhelmed by the amount of work, right? Like you're not spending the first 6 months like sweating bullets and freaking out and not knowing, you know, like where you're, you know, whether you're going to make, right? And I think that is really important. Just trying to find out which one was Williams. Cool. All right. That one. Looks like most of the other Ferraris. Which one? This one. Cool. I think this one looks pretty good, William. Yeah, nice. And again, I think it's a good example of like when you sort of render it up and make it shiny and put the shadow in there, it often works quite well. Yeah. So again, like things that in terms of the rendering, I think it's looking pretty good. I think you could maybe sort of push the core shadow a bit. And do this. Right. I think we could sort of add stronger highlights.
Sorry, did you mean push it a bit more or move it up?
Oh, I see.
The core shadow?
Yeah. So make it more intense.
Okay, yep, got it.
Yeah, so I could probably see if I can. Again, it's quite tricky to paint over these, right? Because there's so many sort of bits and pieces, but so I'll try doing it just by paint. But yeah, so I'm not really meaning to like sort of move it around sort of too much, but yeah, I just think if we could sort of, again, just kind of like make it a little bit sort of stronger, right? I think you could probably push some of those things a little bit. Again, I haven't done a great job of like maintaining form or anything.
Yeah, I can see that now. Yeah.
Yeah. but yeah, just sort of like getting that sort of lit side, the core shadow, and then the reflected light there. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say is like just sort of push it, and that'll give it that like a little bit more sort of pop. And similar sort of thing here, right? Think about where the core shadow is going to be, right? Our core shadow is sort of going to be a little bit more sort of on the side, right? And then we're going to gradiate up a little bit, right? Think about, again, just pushing, right? Just pushing that sort of bounce like a bit. Now, again, a big part of that is because, you know, in many cases, what we're trying to do is sort of show form, right? And push it a little bit. And again, I would say we could do, right, add a few more sort of little highlights to kind of really make this feel as sort of metallic as possible, right? I'm sort of doing I'm doing a very rough job of that. But I think like, yeah, just a few kind of highlights will kind of help that stuff feel a little bit sort of shinier, right? Just sort of popping some of those. Right, and just try and get that sort of contrast in the same way, right? We want to kind of, again, get sort of like a harsher, right? That sort of harsher, more metallic rendering. Yeah, so again, that's just a rough sort of version of that. Here I see, again, this, yeah, I feel like this one, again, I'm not sure whether that is, like that little thing is meant to be there or whether it's meant to be smooth. I know that some of them do have that, but I think what you're seeing here, William, is just that sort of, the form drawing here, like exactly kind of what's happening is a little bit sort of confused. Yeah, and so I think it's just a matter of like probably when you're doing that sort of construction and just sort of understanding like what is happening, right, with that form, like how, right, like what happens here, like where is this? Because I think what you sort of find is, again, if you sort of draw through here, this is probably going to sort of come out here a little bit more, right? And so then this is sort of going to come here, right? So again, it's this, it's almost like, right, sort of cylinder, right? You've got these two overlapping things, right? And what you kind of see,
Yeah, I can see that.
is like that, right? So it's just constructing that out a little bit more. Yeah, and I think that will sort of help a lot. There's a lot of really good stuff sort of happening here. Again, sort of if we look at some of the drawing, these are things that are sort of harder to spot when you are doing the drawing, because you know you don't sort of see it, but here you can see, like, it feels like maybe that is going to sort of pop up a little bit more, right? Like what is sort of happening here, that might be a little bit ambiguous, but again, these are sort of nitpicking things. I think in general you're sort of doing a really good job. Here you can see, again, this line here feels a little bit sort of wobbly, right? Now, the thing is, again, wobbly, not the best technical critique, but
Draw it better, please.
Draw it better, William. Now, the key thing is, sort of, William, is that like sometimes you do these things, right? Like I feel like these lines here are also a bit wobbly, but because they're not really showing up as like high contrast, you can kind of get away with that. But this one really is kind of like a little crown on the car, right? It really sort of shows because you can see the contrast of that bit of metal. And so it's important to understand, again, as you develop, like which bits you're really going to have to sort of fix, right?
I can see that.
And which things sort of you can be like, you know, like no one will know. And that really is half the battle. It's sort of figuring out which bits are going to be which bit. I think this is looking awesome. And again, a really good example of how, when you render it up and you sort of, we sort of zoom out,
Thanks so much.
it's looking very dimensional and really cool. So no, that's awesome.
And I think for everyone,
Thank you.
I think for everyone, where Tim's going with the rendering, and we haven't spent ages on the rendering because, we've been trying to
That's true.
fix all the drawings and stuff. But what I will say is just don't forget all the stuff that you've already done, right? Remember we did like spheres of metal, of rubber, of chrome, of like metallic, painted ones, all of that stuff. Just don't forget it all now, right? All that stuff, just ping it across into your Ferrari and just try and think about all those things when you're rendering. And if you do that, like, it's kind of hard to go wrong. Does that make sense? It's easy to go wrong because, the thing is you're trying to you're trying to do all this stuff all at the same time. You're trying to draw it, you're trying to worry about your ellipses, you're trying to just get the proportions, there's all of these things. But just remember, when you get into the rendering, just try and go through step by step. So William's there, you kind of I don't know if you're still listening, William, you might not be. And it is you kind of forgot about reflected light. You know what I mean? And then everything looks a bit cartoony and flat, because it doesn't have that property to it. Now, if you're just wanting to do some cartoony stuff, that's cool, right? And Tim is the
I can see that I forgot that reflective light now for sure. It does look like that. I agree. Oops.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine, right? And Tim's the biggest exponent of cartoony stuff here. You know what I mean? So when Tim is kind of painting cartoony stuff, he's he'll put in a bit of reflected light, but unless he's trying to get it to look a bit more realistic, he's not worrying about it too much, right? So it's cool. But when you're doing the Ferrari, because that's the challenge of this process, is just try to remember all of those things. You guys have already done it. And I was looking through his spheres and stuff the other day, and 95% of you guys smashed it out of the park, all done your material spheres, all looks awesome. So just don't forget that when you get onto here. Does that make sense to everyone? The problem is it just takes lots of time. So you're oh God, I gotta get this thing colored up. But just try to remember all that stuff and put it into your work.
Well, the other thing is though, you're on the home stretch, and I think what you'll find is the more you kind of add those little things, I was sort of making another note there, you're going to see some ambient occlusion, just darker little bits in between these kind of pipes. And, just adding those is what will give it that feeling of realism. But it's interesting because just yesterday we were doing sphere rendering with first years. And I think you guys did a lot of that in the earlier part of this year. And I'm just it's the same thing, right? It's just push the core shadow, get reflected light in there, you know what I mean? Be subtle about where your ambient occlusion is. The thing is just with this, the thing that you should all notice is how easy it is for reasonable, intelligent, dedicated people to forget the most basic things. And I think what that says to me is that the task that you really have is not this one of getting really advanced. The task is just to remember all of the basics at once in sequence, right?
Yeah.
That really is the challenge. You don't need to worry about how this person or sort of that person, or we who was that artist on ArtStation that we were sort of I feel I can't remember exactly who it was, the one who's the realistic sort of anime art. I forget who that person was. So.
Ranji.
Anyway, we had no, it was the other one who does the really kind of does all the water stuff and the daily paintings. Someone will know what I'm talking about.
Can Lu, yeah.
Yeah.
The kind of stylized stuff you mean, Tim?
Yeah.
This stuff's awesome. Super cool.
Yeah, and so I think people were sort of saying, because we had a nice sort of Q&A session at the end, and people were sort of I'd literally just been we're doing spheres, right? Push your core shadow, get your halfway to black, think about your ambient occlusion. And people are like, yeah, but what about this guy? You know what I mean? Like, how do you do this? And I'm just like,
The same way.
let's get the eyedropper out, and we eyedrop it, and it's halfway to black, right? It's all just halfway to black. It's like he's pushing the core shadow, you know, and I'm just like, that's it. There's nothing secret about this, right? Like,
Look at the little. Go back to that one,
just,
Tim. Oh, go back to that one. Look at even the little bit of reflected light on the gauntlet. You know, the bracelet kind of area. You know, right?
Yeah, and all this is rough.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like if you do the basic things and you just keep doing them, and obviously I'd say the main thing here is just the drawing is really good, and the execution is very nice. It's a good mix of looseness, and that means a lot. If you can get that looseness and solidarity at the same time, you people will forgive you a lot. You know what I mean? You can often create really interesting things. But again, people are sort of like, well, what's the secret here? And it's like, there's literally zero secret to this. You know, there's some of the other stylistic things that we're looking at, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of an interesting mix of stuff. But this is just like, it's just basic halfway to black rendering with really, you know, very good, you know, sort of anime stylized style anatomy drawing, right? So the drawing is really good. And again, just heaps of practice rendering cool stuff like water.
So guess how you get good at drawing figures.
Yeah, right.
Learn from Brian Lee. Right?
Learn from Brian, yeah.
All seen that in class. You guys have all seen that in class where he's doing all this really realistic stuff, and then he shows you like a little anime drawing thing that he's done as well, right? And it's got all this form and like charm and character to it. It's just, and he's like, it's the same thing. I'm just like exaggerating the proportions. So yeah, it's just the secret sauce is just get good at the fundamental stuff, and that'll make you good at everything.
Yeah, that it is really true. And again, you know, like we showed a lot of other really cool stylistic sort of things that are a little bit different to this, that maybe are more flat, more like, you know, more shape based and that sort of thing. But again, I feel like the real challenge is often people look at this and it feels overwhelming. It's overwhelming because it's just a consistent application of very, very basic concepts, right? And the same thing, it's like a consistent application of basic figure drawing concepts, right? Like sort of gesture, getting your proportions right, you know what I mean? Understanding proportion, understanding form drawing, right? These are all the same things. But yeah, there's no secret to any of this. Often, you know, people look at this and they're just like, oh, there must be something kind of magical about it. It's all this stuff in the same way that sort of, you know, what will make these things shinier is just it's the same sort of sphere rendering stuff we did, you know? So, but again, what you need to notice is how easy it is for people who are really trying to just forget them, you know, when you're in the middle of it. And that is often what's happening. It's not there's some mystical thing that we're missing. It's that we're just forgetting to do all the basic things at the right time.
And don't worry, because
that really is the challenge.
Yeah, don't worry, because it still happens to me and Tim. Like whenever we do like a shit thing that we don't like, you look back on it and you try like, why is this wrong? It's like, oh, because I didn't do the stuff. You know, you're just like, duh.
Yeah.
You know, like you literally like slap yourself in the head. You're like, you idiot. Like, but what happens is the more experience you get, the less you do that, right? So the less you have paintings or designs or drawings or whatever that fail, because you're just kind of going through that process more and more, right? And just understanding all the tools in your little tool bag and how to do it all. So that's why, like, this is a pretty hard task, but just stick with it. It does change you guys in so many different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I would like, I would just constantly be running into these problems because I didn't have like the full sort of education, so I knew some of these things. But again, you know, I'd always just sort of be running into this thing, and I swear, 90% of the time when I was painting, the problem was I didn't know where my light source was, right? And I would just sort of be like, oh yeah, I know I need to sort of do this, but I kind of just start anyway, and then I kind of just be like painting, and I just be painting this way, and then I'd be painting that way, and then I'd be like, this is not working, and I'd just be struggling with this, and I'm just like, what's wrong? I can't figure out what's wrong, and I'm like, surely it's not that I haven't figured out where my light source is. You know what I mean? And then like I'd be like, okay, 2 hours in or something, I'd sort of be like, okay, I need to figure out where this light source is. And I kind of like, oh, yeah, okay. And I kind of like put it in and I adjust stuff. So it's like, well, it's probably coming from here. So this would be in shadow. All of a sudden, it just looks better. And I'm like, that was the problem, right? So I was struggling with all this stuff and struggling with like, why is it wrong? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this. And so many times it's kind of like, where's your horizon line? Where's your light source? If you just remember those, if you and understand like at all points in time, you need to understand where's my horizon line, where's my light source. That to me, that was like the vast majority of the major problems I was having. Because I'd be drawing two characters in a scene and like, don't know where that horizon line is. You try and draw a scene and it's like, and just remembering like that one thing, but remembering to actually do it. Made everything easier. Even when I was just sort of drawing around and doing that sort of style where you kind of just sort of keep drawing it until it gets good, it was often the most basic stuff, right?
Hey,
yeah,
Tim,
yeah,
this is Hamish. I had a quick question about the reflected light you were talking about on the Ferrari.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the photo reference, you can't really doesn't really have much. I think
Yeah, for sure.
I think probably partly because they're often on asphalt, so there's not a lot of light coming up. But do you
Yeah.
want us to try and on the feedback sort of put it in anyway? Because
Yeah, I would say because
there's quite a
I mean,
lot of dark shadow on the bottom because it curves around so much.
yeah,
I mean that one's a bit flatter there on the side, but
yeah. So you would see probably again as it sort of comes down here, right? That's going to start to be sort of darker, right? So certainly sort of look at the reference, but I guess that the goal really is to understand that what we're trying to do is show sort of material, right? So we're not trying to paint a hyper-realistic Ferrari. What we're trying to do is render the form, right? And show, and again, this is not a note to William, I'm just kind of putting it here. But, right, so render/show form.
yeah.
And again, if you were to do this and make it like hyper realistic, you'd probably consider everything else a little bit more. Or again, you'd probably be trying to sort of like pick out one part of it to show, and you might sort of fade out some of the others. But again, what we're trying to do is just
Tim,
yeah,
I've got like a really important point here, right? So this is kind of, and this relates to what Hamish is saying, and kind of don't get confused about this, because this is literally like your spheres and stuff as well. If the reference of the Ferrari was on a light grey metallic background that William has painted, there would be reflected light in there. If it's on an asphalt surface, which has less reflective quality to it, there's going to be more shadows and things like that. Does that make sense? Just understand that you're in control of that. So like William's made a choice here to put it on that kind of surface. So you need to render it in that way. Does that make sense? The reference is not like that because every time it's on the racetrack, right? So it is different.
And you need
can
to
paint it either
exaggerate
way.
the things that are going to help you to understand it.
Correct. And you can paint it either way. Like, I'm not saying this is a right or wrong. This is just about like that understanding of that. So when you're looking at the reference, so what Hamish is saying is when it's on the asphalt, there's not as much reflected light because the asphalt surface is not reflecting as much because of the property of that, right? It's also when you look at the reference, understand what's happening. Does that make sense? Understand what's going on, why that's happening. That's really important to I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, Tim, but I feel like guys like John Wallen Liberto and all of, Craig Mullins and all those guys, it's like they just have this clarity of understanding of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And that's why their loose paintings and stuff just look so good because they're just they're literally observation machines. They just know how things go and stuff. So what Tim's showing here, it's there you go, reflected light. But
Light.
yeah, but if you put this car on asphalt on a racetrack, it's not going to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So So it's
and also,
depending
like,
on
you know,
what you
those
do, how
photos
you
have
do it.
been graded. They're organized differently. They're not organized to like show the form, you know. So again, like I think probably what Hamish is saying is probably you might get like again some more ambient occlusion in the shadows. I think that's definitely something you could kind of play with, right? But again, what you're going to see is, yeah, when we're sort of in that sort of gray environment, you're going to get that kind of separation. And that's sort of what we're after. Because again, you're not practicing drawing realistic sort of illustrations. And again, like the illustrations you use might be similar to that person we were looking at on ArtStation before, right? Where some of it's looser. You know, what you want to show is like sort of tearing up the, you know, it's tearing up, you know, En Rouge on like at Spa or something like that in like 1960 something, and you know it's going down the corkscrew or something like that, and there's you know, asphalt is flying around, and you can see the heat of the coming off the engine is like giving you that sort of heat wave distortion. You know what I mean? And the guy's sitting there and he's like gritting his teeth and like, you know, white knuckled on the steering wheel. Like this is not that, which is drawing a car. In like a photo studio thing, you know. And if you wanted to do that, if you want to optimize your image for emotion, right, you don't do all those things, you know. You behave sort of differently, right? So again, that's the basic idea. We're just sort of saying like halfway to black, get that sort of form going, and we're practicing that, right? Because the other thing is, again, if you try and do those things, then it's very easy to make it look cool. And then we're at that stage where we're sort of like, well, oh, cool, like it looks good, but you're still not doing halfway black. You could push your core shadow a little bit more. And why aren't you doing that? You know, because again, the goal here is for you to learn how to do those things, how to show the form, how to show material separation. Once you do that, you will find that creating those other illustrations that are more emotive is a lot easier, you know, because the trick here is, again, as we're saying, is to remember a whole bunch of basic stuff in sequence. So that kind of is the task, if that makes sort of sense, Hamish. But yeah, I would say let's play up the reflected light, let's play up the core shadow, sort of, you know, as much as we can, because often, you know, those are the things that if you look at those cool, you know, sort of, if we can find some, because again, I think like, you know, sort of Scott Robertson does a really good job of this sort of thing, you know, doing the sort of hyper, you know, rendered sort of things. And, you know, it's like there's a particular look to that kind of, you know, highly designed, you know, industrial design stuff, if that makes sense. And yeah, these are, I'm like, why are all those things, why is everything sort of small? Right? But again, what this does is it communicates very effectively to your team, like what, you know, what your form is, you know, that's kind of what it does. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that we've got to do, right, is figure out, again, like how to show that form, how to kind of get that working. And that's kind of the goal. Again, you know, because like that is sort of that's what we're trying to do, you know, and it's like, well, shouldn't we be doing this as well? Maybe, you know, but yeah, so, you know, even if you're doing it in 3D, right, or you're like, you know, doing sort of, you know, different sort of things, the goal is still when you render it, you're wanting to sort of push the form and show that stuff more than anything else. And that's why, again, like some people's 3D art looks crap because they're just like, well, I don't know, that's what the render gave me. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't show the form that well. Cool. So this is Megan's, and I think overall, sort of this one's looking good. Megan, like the perspective and all most of the form sort of stuff is looking good. I try to put this shadow in. This shadow will kind of tell you, right, like how everything here is kind of looking. Again, I think this one looks good. I'm not sure what the distance is here, right? Distance from here to here. Right, it feels like this wheel, right, is maybe a bit far out. Maybe. Again, it could just be this one is sort of far out too, though, and that's why, again, it'd be good to see some of that sort of structure, just so we can kind of figure out like where do these sort of fit with each other on the ground. But I think overall the general sort of structure and all of that stuff is looking really good. So it's just a matter of kind of adding as much of that structure to the engine as possible. Again, remember here this panel kind of ends here. Right, we've got the axle coming through here. And also remember that, again, the engine sort of itself, right, is kind of only sort of comes up to there, right? So again, you've got that kind of like, right, those sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? You got those guys sort of there, right? This is, right, that's kind of okay, but again, the engine is going to sort of fit a little bit sort of further back, right? And then you're going to sort of see your sort of other stuff there, right? At least it's somewhat like that. Check the proportions properly, but yeah, the engine isn't going to go all the way back there, right? Because again, the engine is sort of in front of the sort of transmission and stuff like that.
And hey Tim, I would just say, I'd just say, Megan, like, just watch stuff. Like, so at the moment, like, it looks good, but then there's just bits that feel a bit wonky, you know? So like the line, and I was going to talk about what Tim's drawing now, but that red line you've got in between the two blue lines on the nose cone, Tim, you know, like the curvy one that Megan's drawn, like up, back, above the 4. Yeah, so that one there. Right, just do you see, Megan, how like it doesn't line up with the blue lines that Tim's drawing? So you've drawn the structure there, but then you haven't followed what you've drawn. Does that make sense, Megan? Like it's like you put it there, but then you just decided I'm going to put it there, and then just ignore everything about it, right? Rather than like kind of following what you, yeah. So that line that Tim's drawing now, right? It just doesn't line up with your grid. You know what I mean?
Doesn't seem like it's sort of lining up quite
straight. It's not straight. And then like your cockpit and stuff, it's like those, you know, the ellipses on there, they don't look like they sit flat on the surface. You know, you're just kind of drawing a round line, just trying to match the two up roughly. Just remember, like, if ever anything, this is for anyone, if ever it looks a little bit wonky and you're not sure how to get it, just draw a box around it. I was going to say a cube. Don't worry about a cube. Just draw a box around it.
Yeah.
Right? Just draw the box and like, does it line up? Go back to the boat theory. Do my curves work? Just draw the little dots. You just draw the dots and then you just connect the dots up. Like, you don't have to be good at drawing, you know, like I showed last week, just these wonky ass crap lines, right? But if you draw them in the right place, that'll look better than if they're like not considered or not drawn to your structure. Yeah. So just keep
putting
working.
A few little markers in there.
Yeah. Just keep working.
You know what I mean?
on. So Megan, just like, because I really love your work. It's cool, and you do like awesome stylized stuff, and it's cool, right? But I feel like just use this as a challenge to like train yourself not to like. So I feel like at the moment, what you're doing is like, lazy is the wrong word. It's not that you're being lazy, but like you've got to challenge your brain to like not give up as soon as you're giving up. Does that make sense? Like, because what you're doing is like, you're putting in the line and you're just like going, I don't quite know where it goes. I'm just going to put it in. And I like give up. I'm not, you're not following through. Like, you're not actually measuring those bits out, which will like, in this case, will make your drawing like 200% better. Does that make sense? Like, it won't just make it a little bit better. It will make it like heaps better, you know? So just try to like, all it is your brain. It's just your brain going like, I like drawing stylized stuff, so I'm going to like make it stylized. But you can have it stylized, but it look really good at the same, like really well constructed at the same time. So don't take this as like, you know, I know you're not Megan, but like, this is for everyone. Like, don't take it like Tim and Simon are like forcing me to like draw realistic stuff. Is like, we're not.
Yeah.
Right? We're forcing you to draw very clearly structured stuff is what we're doing, but we're not forcing you to draw like realistic stuff. So try not to let your brain confuse the two things. Does that make sense? Because remember, we always tell people is like, people will go like, but that's my style, you know? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's just because you're shit at doing this, right? Like, yeah, if you know, like this, like, what's his face who draws Dragon Ball Z is like really not very good at drawing people, or not as good, but like, but his like technical stuff is like, holy crap, it's on point. It's like super good. And I mean, it's Dragon Ball Z. It's like, I mean, how much money would that guy be worth? I don't know.
It's like
a lot.
yeah,
Or
it's what
someone's-
everyone
yeah.
considers shit drawing to be is Dragon Ball Z. Everyone's like, oh, that's like manga trash, right? It's like the worst anatomy and everything else, right? He's
And you
one
can
of the
like it.
best
We're not
technical
talking about the
drawers
show
ever.
or how much you enjoy it as a kid or whatever. We're just talking about the actual
Yeah.
the draftsmanship
Yeah.
of, you know, of this, or draftspersonship,
And
whatever we're talking
It's
about.
also a good
The
example
drawing.
of how you can mix stylized stuff with cartoony stuff, right? So, you know, and you can also exaggerate the cars and you can give life to them. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this thing where, you know, oh, I'm drawing like Scott Robertson, right? We always sort of show that again, just because it's like, you know, this is a skill, right? You can do that. If someone wants to draw like Scott Robertson, don't be like, oh, I could never do that. You know, it's like, yeah, no, you can, you know, but in the same way, it's sort of, there's a huge number of ways you can apply that same knowledge, you know. I mean, okay, like everyone thinks Scott Robertson's good, but way more people like Akira Toriyama's work. Hey, put it that way, right? No one gives a single fuck about what Scott Robertson does. He does not have heaps of followers on Instagram. Most people are just like, I don't get it. It's
Well, certainly
very
mainstream, yeah.
well-rendered
It's
cars.
but everyone knows Dragon Ball
Yeah,
Z.
no, I just mean like people.
Yeah.
You know, your average person, you show them that, you're like, I don't get it. You know, how many kids love Dragon Ball, right? And again, you know, a big part of that is, you know, it's sort of super cartoony and, you know, like, and you know, the story's like sort of a bit childish, let's say, because it's a kid's book. But, you know, you can apply those same drawing things to more cartoony stuff with more life that people do actually respond to in a highly emotional way. Again, what Scott Robertson's doing is, you know, like design. You know, it's automotive design. It's completely different, right? You're trying to design these kind of objects that have this kind of, you know, visual appeal and sort of functional, and it's a completely different thing. But again, you can use the same skills, you know, in many ways, right? So don't think that it has to be like highly rendered or whatever. But yeah, if you want to do this, you probably need to get good at doing the perspective, right? And you can see here, like these wheels are kind of like wobbly. They got heaps of character,
Yeah, they're kind of not.
you know,
too.
but there's consistency there. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of thought, maybe not thought, but there's a lot of kind of consistency with, you know, you're going to find like you're going to be able to draw a line through there and they're all roughly going to line up, right? With that stuff, right? You're going to see those ellipses, right? All that stuff's there. It's kind of inked in a bit of a wobbly way, you know what I mean? And the way it's kind of like organized is a little bit sort of different, but it's super consistent and it does follow all of the stuff we're saying, right? All of that stuff. Right, you know, you see those ellipses here, right? This one here, you know, it's the same stuff. It's exactly the same stuff, right? So again, you can draw cool cars like this. You know, you can draw whatever you want. We're just teaching you this Ferrari, right? Because it's boring, and if it's not boring, then it's super hard to critique.
and hey Tim, Megan was like, I wasn't trying to draw a stylized. Yeah, I wasn't like, don't 100% don't take this the wrong way, Megan. Like I wasn't having a crack at that.
No,
I was just more
totally.
like, I was just more like, try to, well, I can see what you're doing, like in terms of you're going like, I want to get this right and I'm trying to draw a structure, but then you're drawing the structure, but then your drawing doesn't fit the structure. Does that make sense? And it's like, why is your brain not doing that? So you got to try and work out why. And I know you love your boarding and all that stuff. And then you look at like, say, really good boarders, you know, if we look at like Peter Young's boards, who's like, you know, teaches class here, or you look at like Glenn Keane or whatever that, you know, does animation and kind of boarding and stuff, their drawings are super structured and all the perspective's good. And it's just like what Tim was showing Dragon Ball Z. It's like, it can be stylized and it can have its like intricacies to it, right? But the really good people, It's like, it's still freaking solid. You know what I mean? So yeah, you just want to like. So Megan, just try and make it more solid. That's all. And Tim's giving you notes on that, and just it's all good. Just keep you're not doing anything wrong. Just keep going with it. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's, again, I mean, I was basically like, looks good. Yeah, keep going. Just keep working on the structure, check proportion. I mean, a huge part of, again, what we're really sort of advising is the concept of draw through. It's just where often it's really, like you've got these sort of little features here, and I was sort of making a quick note. The real trick is kind of, we're going to want to just be like, fuck it, I can wing it. Done. Hands above your head. You're like, yeah, look at that. Just wung it, aced it, I hold my beer. I'm just going to draw these, like, just kind of like, I reckon, yeah, nah, cool, done, And it's just like, what we just want to do, right, is when we're sort of placing those things, right, is just to kind of be like, let's do the draw through, right? Let's just sort of make sure, these things are kind of in the right spot. Let's kind of find again, like some of this sort of structure around here, right? And that'll kind of give us a better indication of where these things are. Again, we're trying to sort of place these lines. So, again, let's sort of draw through so we can kind of accurately understand where they cross over. Same thing kind of here, just a little bit more, right? Draw through, draw this thing. It's just the drawing through that will really kind of help you understand, right? Same thing with the engine, right? We want to sort of be like, well, I got the engine here, right? And then I got this thing here, and I got this thing here, right? And we're sort of drawing through so that we're drawing stuff transparently almost, so that we can find those things in the back, right? And that's what gives things that sort of solidarity, right? Again, you don't end up like drawing every single thing through, but you can if you want to in the future, and B, like, you kind of do a lot of it in your imagination, right? In many ways, what we're doing is practicing thinking about the form, right? And where those center lines are and what's happening. Anyway, but yeah, no, I think that's looking really cool. I think we should take a quick break, and we'll sort of come back in 5 or 10 and sort of keep going with these and give sort of feedback. But yeah, it looks like there's some really cool ones. Again, like Tree did a nice sort of some nice Fresnel sort of effect there on that sort of stuff. That's looking cool, nice and shiny.
We exchanged some words on Facebook, Tree and I. So it was.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Maybe you can critique that one.
Oh no, because I was. How last week I was stirring him about the Kona Vision, and then he was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was like, "Here you go," and I'm like, "Good, that's good, Tree. Well done."
It looks good, nice and shiny. Yeah, cool, awesome. Yeah, but let's come back in in 5 or 10, and we'll sort of keep going through these. But yeah, it looks cool, guys. Everyone's doing a really good job.
All right, no worries. See you in a minute.
usually save something with my face. Everything else is just like.
Well, once you've got other things, stylized.
Yeah,
I remember, like, student life before quality. I mean, I've made sure I've done every single one.
Yeah, well, that's good.
I'm there.
I respect the grind. I've been trying to. I've been putting more effort into my major project because I kind of was treating multimedia as like my lunch subject and whatnot. So I got like 0.
I've done for my major, I think I'm just doing like Tesla. I kind of want to do that for a project. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
now
just
down to do it.
so far into like my project, but I really want to try and do this thing so that maybe.
Can I please get cash or Jess?
I'm just trying to test.
What time is she?
She finishes at 12.
Okay, yeah, cool. All good. Yeah, I'll sort that out.
Okay, thank you.
But then you still got like, because you would have done the
Yeah.
that was like a different idea. But you got, what'd you do for that one?
I did like a children's story. Yeah, so I was like, let's suss that. So I kind of had an idea for it, but now I'm like doing this one. I tried doing that.
I swear, like
So much preferring this
I'll
idea.
be more classes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm gonna do a graphic novel for my major project next year, but I kind of want to have all of the design stuff from it. Like I kind of make, like do the mock thing, just make all yeah, because I feel like that would be better for me. I do that. I just did that, but I did like first page.
Because I saw it was on the cover.
It's okay. I want to make it.
It's like serious, but yeah.
It's like a post-apocalyptic thing, like make it more Art Deco, like I've had this idea for like 5 years, and I'm always sound like a crack artist trying to explain it because I'm just like, and this whole world building thing, but like.
So I have a thing on all idea, everything is
Exactly.
I think everyone would have an idea.
Exactly. And I feel like that's something that's like great. It's like easier than the city body stuff as well. Like the standard just that.
Well, everyone's doing something.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I guess so straightforward.
Yeah.
Everyone can experiment. Yeah. To be honest, I don't know if I'm just gonna be stylized. That's me.
No.
I guess that's really it's when you
Say
program
Yeah,
then,
it's
but like I feel like
it's chaos.
it's kind of the playground side and stuff.
If you want to
I mean, I don't mind doing it, like, I don't mind driving
a bit of key, bit of like where playing kind of stuff, but not fully
abstract stuff.
one after the other. And then
Just turn the shoulder because
you just get
just
like
go
the whole,
crazy.
Yeah.
get the story, that's all you want. The story. That's why we built it.
Everyone's now seeing it.
For
It's
example,
like massive.
major element.
Have you noticed?
Yeah.
So much freedom.
That's why everyone gets stuck.
Yeah.
I got to babysit this bird for like 2 nights. It's so cute. His name was Gandalf.
Randolph.
Yeah. We're not allowed to have pets, so that's why we only had it for 2 nights. I'm gonna have to babysit him again because the owner, she has like something like being renovated or fixed at her apartment, so that he's so good and he sings and I miss him so much. Like, the house is just so empty now.
And then like same with multimedia.
And he's such a crying baby. Like I leave her room for like a few seconds and he goes and screams and screams. Like I come in the room and he's quiet. I take him out the cage and he starts singing. I'm like, he's such a baby. Like I miss him.
I don't think they're doing big parts.
Have you done your quiz yet?
Stressed
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Is it supposed to be 50 hours?
How did it go?
30. Oh, story.
I was gonna do mine Thursday or Friday because last week I was pretty jam
I
packed.
think as long as you, I think as long as you,
I mean, I've been stuck with
I'm just trying to figure out what, because like the questions are different apparently, but I'm trying to figure out what exactly she would put the slides in there. Because I was looking at some of the slides and they're
like, I watched the lectures, I was like, it was really bad episodes until like, every time you do a post, that's then it's like, oh, it was saying, I was like, this dude, doing it, like, oh, and listen to the lectures.
yeah, like I don't know what she's gonna put into the slides though. Like, for example, the coins, like what's she gonna ask about that? Like the dying and stuff.
Oh, it's still in, I don't know, like, the sheet metal, and he's going all these quotes for like each post, and that's like, it's a paragraph. And they just said,
Was still here. Because I don't remember her saying anything about going to America.
well, I'm just trying to,
Unless my memory is just bad. Yeah.
they want to know your thing.
That's like, you know, there's brain dead's kind of stuff there.
I mean, that's what's checking. You know.
Like, I mean, I've done
Yeah, like I don't know what they're gonna put in the slides about like dying and because I watched the lectures and I watched the review ones and like the review ones were like they were helpful but not that great at the same time. Like I understand like you know they're gonna be from here but I don't know exactly what from. Yeah.
Yeah, or being into it, kind of dissolving it and building a
What else did I say?
then I'm always like, right, what I'm changing.
Yeah, like one is what they're gonna ask like some of them are like
This is the match, this is their blah blah blah, such and such. So every question I'm trying to like,
My final presentations, so we just need like, we did it like weekend.
I kind of show Shane.
yeah, unless you've gone back and changed it because
Yeah,
I
I have.
have gone back and changed it once. Well, at least the presentations are longer now. Like, they used to be like 5 minutes. And now they're like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Yeah, which is good.
Or never had it. I just like. It's real.
I just posted a because I
It's like, yeah, double checking what's in the slides in case I missed anything.
Just say it.
because they would have the portfolios for them to grade.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what they were telling me when I was doing my test. I had like that to do something from. And then
That's good actually, because I've done like a whole bunch of like sketches and sketchbooks.
yeah, take notice of that and say like, oh, sketch one. I was trying to do this sketch. they will love it.
Yeah.
So if you just like show, how did you
Yeah.
where'd you go?
Yeah, well, it might be because I just feel like I think that's my hay fever. Was sneezing in class a lot. Like now, like
Time I do it, like I always end up doing the first thing that I did anyway. Every single time, and like even when I'm like doing it for sex.
All right, I'm back. Cool. Yeah, cool. Cool. So this is Lewis's. Nice. So yeah, I feel like again, it's good to sort of render it up and see how this is sort of going. I feel like again, it's important to understand sort of where that shadow is going to be. So I think that's where again, constructing out the shadow will be important. Let's figure out sort of how far above, right, this is going to be. Whereas I feel like here Lewis just kind of sort of copying whatever is here, just kind of moving it down. Whereas I feel like we could place that a bit better. Yeah, so other things, again, I feel like we could, right, find a sort of a core shadow here a little bit more, right? So again, just kind of make that sort of light core shadow, right, here, reflected light, etc., right, sort of curving round. Right, and I'd say sort of similar things for that, right? Let's get sort of the, some sort of shading happening there. I feel like, again, we've sort of done like a good job of sort of, again, putting in some rendering there. But again, I feel like it's sort of looking a little bit brushy, right? We've sort of got some brushiness there. And I think it's better off, again, just thinking about where, right, that sort of core shadow is. Let's sort of push that a little bit more. Basically, it's sort of going to be the general advice, right? Let's sort of render these out. And again, basically just work on rendering the cylindrical forms. And that just means, again, understanding like where that sort of core shadow is, right? And defining like the light. Core shadow, right? Here we're going to have reflected light. Right, so just understanding that, right, that most of these cylindrical forms are going to have that sort of basic sort of structure, right? Now, again, that might be, that it's not always going to be, exactly in that position, right? Again, like for all sort of cylindrical forms, again, core shadow could be sort of down here, right? This whole form could be lit, right? That doesn't really matter, right? I'm not sort of saying it always needs to be sort of up the top or anything like that, right? It totally depends. Again, core shadow could kind of be over here. Wherever you kind of want it to be, but make sure we separate those things out. Right, light, core shadow, reflected light. So just keep doing that. That's what will give it that sort of pop. And I think that's probably the most important thing to look at the rendering stage. Again, you know, I feel like with, you know, you sort of tackled a slightly sort of simpler Ferrari. And again, like, you know, the lines are quite sort of thick. And, you know, I feel like, again, next time you can, you know, have a go at pushing some of those elements. But yeah, for now, let's just work this. Again, same sort of thing here. Right, all of these forms are basically gonna, you know, have that same structure, right? Put shadows in there, right? Get the highlight here. So yeah, as much as you can, get that sort of working. Cool, but again, I think it's just a matter of like tweaking a few of those things. I think that'll sort of, again, allow you to experiment with the rendering a little bit more. Cool, but yeah, keep going. This is George's. Cool, I think this is looking great. Lots of good stuff. Again, remember sort of what I was saying. I've said this like a few times. I may have sort of missed it on the last one, but remember, again, this is, you can skip this if you just want to kind of go to rendering. But again, remember that the engine is kind of a little bit sort of shorter than that. Again, that's apologies if that's my bad, if I didn't sort of spot that last time. I forget whether you'd sort of drawn that in or not. Yeah, if we look at the, right, at the kind of proportion now, on this one, it's hard to see because it's sort of like you sort of got these proportions, but we're sort of drawing this engine. But either way, it's kind of the same. You can see the engine, these are sort of the throttle bodies here, sort of at the top, the exhaust is kind of coming out the side. It's a different engine, right? On this one, it's a little bit the same, but yeah, here. So again, you can kind of see, and it's sort of tricky because there's like a red bit there, but yeah, you sort of got, I got super blurry photo, right? You sort of got the engine there, right? The body kind of stops there, just short of that, right? Again, you can kind of see, right? The engine kind of stops just short of that, but it is sort of quite long, right? Again, think about where that is sort of, where that axle is sort of going to go in. The body basically just stops just shy of that, and the engine is kind of a little bit similar, right? And then again, all exhaust manifold stuff is kind of coming out. So yeah, but I think it's looking awesome. Lots of really cool stuff. Yeah, and the drawing's looking really solid. So I just say keep going. Again, you can, anyone I know a lot of people are just going to be like, I can't be bothered. I just want to render it up. In which case, again, that's totally fine. But yeah, I think overall it's sort of looking good, George. All right. So again, check the proportion, right? I'm doing like a diagrammatic sort of like, oh, I think it's kind of more here. I can't tell exactly where it is, right? It might be a little bit sort of longer, might be a little bit, yeah, here or there. And yeah, again, it is sort of tricky to keep track of all those things. Cool. So again, I forget whose this was because I can't see the sort of name there. But yeah, I think overall it's sort of looking good. I think we just need to sort of let's try draw these with like these ellipses. With the right sort of tool. Come on, Photoshop. Right. So, you know, let's sort of make sure those are clean. I think that'll kind of help you a lot. Sort of trying to freehand those. And I think some of them are just sort of looking wobbly, right? And again, keep in mind, right, all of these right, all of these ellipses, right, all of these things are going to be on the same minor axis. And that means, again, that they're going to sort of line up, right? They're going to use the same elliptical math. Whereas here, again, you can sort of see this is sort of just getting a bit wobbly. Honestly, it'd be quicker and easier to do it with the ellipse guides, right? Sort of in Photoshop, right? So yeah, that's the main sort of thing. Again, I think the block-in is kind of working well. When you get to it, again, you know, pay attention to these sort of planar forms you've got going and understand where that sort of core shadow is sort of going. I think that will work really well. So I feel like a lot of the structural stuff is going nicely. Again, you know, it would be good to kind of have the, right, that kind of bar in there. I don't know whether that's the seat or whether we need that sort of thing, but yeah, so just all these ellipses, right? Let's use this thing, right? The elliptical tool. But yeah, cool stuff. Nice. So this is Murray's one. Yeah, nice. I think this is looking really good. Nice and sort of clean. Like how you played around with the again, the texture on the wheels. I think that's looking good. Yeah, no, I think that's looking really cool. Again, not a lot of sort of like huge sort of, you know, like, oh, this is like really wrong and et cetera, et cetera. Again, I feel like with the drawing, maybe this is like a little bit long, right? But, you know, overall, I feel like that's working really nicely. Again, I feel like this bit, we could sort of try, this is tricky, right? The resolution of forms here could be a bit better. See if I can show you guys what I mean. Just fix it. But basically, just kind of looking for, and again, I won't be able to get it sort of 100% right. It'll probably take a lot of sort of masking and stuff. But what I'm sort of imagining, right, is just to sort of make sure that we're getting, again, the sort of the distance, right? Just watching that kind of distance, right? Like what's sort of happening here. So I think this is still going to be a little bit sort of darker around here, moving into that sort of core shadow right? And again, we're going to have bit of something a bit more like this. Now, again, as this, I think this is one of those things I kind of struggle with as well, right? Sort of, again, as this sort of transforms or sort of transitions, we just got to watch, again, like the distance of that sort of shape we're making, right? So again, I'm not sure whether I'm making that sort of heaps better, right? But that's kind of what I mean, right? It's like, let's just sort of make again, I think this highlight could probably move in a little bit. If that makes sense. So just sort of try and make it, just hacking away at it. But again, just try and make that form feel like it's a little bit sort of rounded. Again, how these resolve, right? How this kind of form, right, sort of resolves into this kind of highlight is sort of tricky. Again, if you're sort of running into major sort of trouble like that, probably one of the better things to do is kind of just don't make a giant sort of highlight that's wrong here. Just keep it a little bit sort of subtler. Yeah, and maybe sort of try and find some of that sort of information reference, right? That's something that where you can really sort of help yourself by looking at reference and sort of seeing what's sort of happening there. But yeah, that's the basic sort of idea. Just see if we can clean that up a little bit.
And just like the sorry Tim, just like the cylinder, right? The cylinder everyone did, right? It's got like the cylindrical form, and then you've got the face of the cylinder. So remember that little highlight you put around there is quite subtle. Remember that? I think if you just do that, Murray, it will like look better, right? You just make it more subtle there, and it will look more like that cylindrical forms then going into that one. And then what you do is, like, if you want it to curve, you almost put like a diagonal plane there. You know what I mean? And just keep that kind of like pretty subtle too, and then just gradiate between the two. Does that make sense? Yeah. Kind of like when I'm rendering stuff.
Subtler.
Yeah. When I'm rendering stuff like that, I try to just think of myself in like, what would happen if I did this in like Blender or a 3D program? Like, what's kind of going on? And like, remember, like if you do a curve, right, it's a bevel. You bevel it, so it's actually like just lots of little planes that just just do over.
Yep.
And then all you do is like you just gradiate between the two, but it's just subtle. That's all. Whereas like sort of a bit at the moment, you're sort of like, I'm going to do like the cartoony version of how that, like, it's like you're abstracting it. Does that make sense? You're like going, it's kind of like a curvy thing here. So I'm going to like abstract how that goes, which is how all cartoon stuff is. It's just like an abstraction of stuff. So, but I think to make it less abstract is you just make it more subtle. Yep. And just try to think about it as those planes, right? Cylinder, round, curvy shape, butts in, and that's what it's doing. It's like you got this one, and then that one goes down, so they're going to have a different value because of that 1, 2, 3 read, and then you just transition subtly between the two.
Yeah. And again, looking at the specific form, the model reference, right, where people are drawing those little models is probably really good for this, because you can kind of see this part kind of rendered from different angles, which will sort of really help. But yeah, that's sort of what I'd say is a try. Again, I don't think I've done the best job of that, but yeah, cool. No, I think there's lots of good stuff happening here. I think you could probably put, right, stronger highlight. But again, a big part of the sort of stronger highlight thing is that we sort of often with those metallic surfaces, it's not just, it's like we need a stronger highlight, but not necessarily like a brighter highlight, right? Like making those highlights kind of feel sort of stronger is often a matter of kind of putting some sort of, darker colors next to them, right? So, we can kind of keep making this, sort of lighter, but again, the way we kind of make it feel sort of stronger is often by, putting a darker sort of color next to it, if that makes sense. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that's kind of, this is exactly sort of what you need to do, but that's just an example of that, right? A rough sort of example, right? We can make it feel more intense by increasing the contrast of it, right? And that'll kind of probably make it shinier, which might not be what you want. Again, I forget how shiny that part is. But that's the basic idea. So yeah, I think this is looking really good. I feel like here, I think that's working pretty well. Yeah, it's all looking pretty good. Yeah, so again, I'd say that's, that feels like that's sort of successful to me. There's just a couple of these things again, like you can kind of see this, right, where this kind of transforms around this shape here. Now this is a thing where if you sort of draw it, it's probably going to look okay. But as you're adding the highlight, right, you kind of, you sort of see that, we haven't really figured out how that sort of goes, right? And how you're going to handle the, again, right? Like, is you going to have like a little sort of shine or highlight there? Again, we can get Fresnel effect on the glass here. Like, what is going to happen? So we haven't really covered glass rendering that much, right? But again, just sort of think about, like sort of how that sort of function.
Yeah, I feel like once again,
again,
a bit like William at the start, Murray, you've got that bit in that corner there where, it feels like that bit's not constructed. It feels like you're sort of almost pulling, like Tim was showing William right at the start, where with the intake down the bottom, where he kind of had like drawn the line, but then the line in the shape inside the line was kind of like the wrong. It's almost like he drew the wrong one. Does that make sense? And it's almost like he going from the top one to the bottom one and stuff. It's like one of those Escher paintings, with the stairs. You keep, like see that corner there. It's like, where does that go? It goes halfway in between the glass and the other line you've got over there. So you can see like it just doesn't quite match up. So just try to get the glass bit all matching up. Try to get the bottom section all matching up, and then. Even that bit where you got the red, see the red bit in the right, just above that, Tim, like the metal part next to, there, like that's going to have form to it as well. It's not just like a line.
That's right.
Does that make sense? So you need to add a bit of
structure here.
Yeah, and you can do that with rendering or or line work or whatever, but just a little bit of that stuff in there, Murray. And all it is, it's kind of like what I was talking to Megan for. It's just like concentration and just like not letting your brain just go like give up. Just draw a line and
so
hope it will be
things.
okay. Just try and like, okay, this is not exactly in the right spot, so like why, how do I solve that? Okay, because what you'll find is like, here's the key thing, guys. This is the key thing, is that in the drawing you will do that and your brain will do that and you go like, this is all going to be okay. And then you go to render it and you're like, it's not okay. And then you make 10 hours extra work for yourself, where like if you just spent an extra 2 hours at the start, like that would help. But the problem is, like Tim and I understand the problem exactly, is that when you are doing this, you don't have a process for that. So you don't know that it's going to be all okay. You don't know that spending that 2 hours is actually going to be useful at the end. Does that make sense, everyone? But just try and like, it's super hard. It's like we're blindfolding you and like leading you through the forest and be like, just hold my hand and we won't fall over. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a bit like that stuff. But just if all of you guys, if you just construct that a little bit more early on, it just saves you heaps of time later. Does that make sense? Because you don't have to, it's not even about yours, Murray, now, but it's like, just, you don't have to keep going back and trying to fix stuff and be like, why is this not working? Because if you get it right at the start, it just flows. Remember that Rob Rupel story I tell you about, where he paints really slow, right? He paints really slow, but he paints shit faster than everybody else, right? Because just everything he does is like, just got that level of, like, this is the wrong way of explaining it, but level of like correctness to it. You know what I mean? So like he doesn't have to go back.
It's precision. Yeah.
That's a good. Yeah.
It's like that Navy SEAL saying, right? Like, what is it like? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Just trying to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone's like, if you're rushing, you're slow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're smooth, that might be slow, but in the end, it's fast, right? Because when things matter, if you just don't make mistakes, even if you're going slow, you'll find you get there, and it's like, look, it all happened. It all sort of, you know what I mean?
Have you guys ever had the feeling where like you're rushing at your house to like get out of the house, and you're like keys, phone, wallet, blah blah blah, and you just like rush around. You're like a headless chook and everything, like, and you're trying to, and all of a sudden you realize like I'm late, and I'm gonna like. Whereas if you were just like, okay, I need this, I need that, and you get all those things, and you be on time. Does that sort of make sense? It's sort of what you're doing. It's like, yeah, you're just like really rushing on the base stuff, and then the like kind of the other stuff is taking longer because you rushed kind of earlier, right? Yeah, and yeah, Hamish just posted up as well, Tim, like the helmet tutorial from Scott Robertson. That Hamish posted up is really good for like rendering the Ferrari, which is like, yeah, spot on, because that's basically what you're doing. So yeah.
So I've just done a few other things, right? Just sort of adding a bit of pop with some just quick overlay. We're probably heading a little bit past halfway to black for some of these materials, but again, I feel like one of the things is with the rubber is maybe that's sort of getting a little bit, right? It's getting a little bit sort of light with the highlights, right? Again, we still, I just feel like that material probably needs to be a little bit sort of darker, like to begin with. Do you know what I mean? So it's probably starting right here. We're sort of at that sort of 43 or whatever. So anyway, I'm just adding a bit of like dumb contrast, right? And you just see it kind of helps it like pop a little bit, right? And again, you can add that sort of Fresnel effect sort of thing. That'll help. So yeah, I mean, a big part of what we're sort of saying here with these little details, this is what I'd sort of consider your sort of secondary and tertiary form problems. And mostly a lot of these things are tertiary form issues. You can see the same thing with the rim, right? You've drawn all the rim and stuff, but you can see you sort of left this gap here. And I think, you got to understand that, again, there's like a lip here, right? And that's the whole, you're sort of going, you're like, oh, do I really have to add like 10 million ellipses because it feels like too much? When you come to the, where what you need to do is you need to sort of really, from a construction point of view, you need to, if I go back here, and again, this will be really, just trying to figure out the best way of kind of doing it right. But if you think about that, right, we've kind of got this form, and then it kind of goes in, right? So we go in, right? And then we've got another line here for this one. Again, these are all sort of ellipses, right? And then we've got basically, right, the windscreen is kind of coming up from that. To construct them.
Oh, you just dropped out a bit, Tim.
Right, what you tend to draw is kind of, oh, did I?
Just like that, Murray. You literally do like 3 lines, and then the rest of the drawing appeared.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I think my Dropbox was.
It was alright before.
Yeah. It was just lagging a bit.
Yeah, it's just lagging now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is lagging. Let me try. I'll swap over.
You got the idea though, right, Murray? Yeah. I feel like we're flogging a dead horse. You probably don't even need to draw it anymore. Murray's here in the class, and he's like, I know what you're saying, Tim.
I know.
I draw it better. I draw it better. Shut up.
Draw it better. Yeah, but I think it is easy to just be like, nah, she'll be right. It's okay. But yeah, the key here is when we come to rendering, that's what you see, right? Is like, okay, so what we're gonna draw is this, right? We're probably gonna sort of draw these lines. right? But now we've got this space in here, right? And we sort of know where that highlight is going to go. So we sort of construct the form, right? But now we've sort of got the space in there, and then you can kind of render away here. You can do this thing that I've kind of done. You can give that form. Again, the same thing here, right? You kind of have that space. You can run that highlight up there, run that highlight up there, and it sort of works. Now, again, initially, if you're just looking at the drawing, you're like, why do I need that? When you come to render it, though, you realize that, again, having these little sort of form things there, like, really helps, right? Understanding that the dimensionality is what gives you those easy little wins, because you're just like, yep, highlight there, highlight there, highlight there, and bang, it just looks sort of good. So yeah, just keep that in mind. That's often why we're drawing through and sort of, adding so much of that structure and, stuff that often just feels like, why are we doing this? Why are we going to this length? All right. Okay. So we need to, again, hopefully I've covered the basic sort of things that we're going to sort of talk about there. I feel like, we can probably just do some sort of notes and point to those sort of examples. But yeah, adding some Fresnel effect, pushing the core shadow, that's just what I mean. I'm like, how I did that is I just made an overlay layer and I selected like a dark red and I was like, zoop. And you just find like that just sort of pops the core shadow. And then again, you just kind of select like a really bright red or bright white sort of color and just go zoop and run an overlay sort of on the highlight, and it just kind of separates that out and gives it some pop. Yeah, simple techniques. Cool. This is Aaron's, and nice. So again, trying to sort of do it without the lines, which I think is a good idea. So yeah, just gonna sort of say similar things. Let's watch the form. And it's going to be a similar sort of story, right? Like let's see if we can again render these out. Again, I don't know what sort of stage this is at, right? But let's sort of render out these forms. So yeah, good stuff. Again, I feel like we've sort of got these lines, like we've got that sort of stuff here, right? Let's just kind of add some more structure here. So that's again that sort of secondary, tertiary form stuff, right? And we want highlights, shadows, highlights, etc. Same thing here, right? Let's get the sort of light, right? Reflection sort of happening there. Yeah, because you've drawn all this stuff. There's heaps of sort of stuff there. So that's sort of what I'd say, right? Is just go through. This is looking good. And a lot of it is just block in, right? Start with just go call it halfway to black. Again, that's what that means, halfway to black. So just start that way, block it in. Similar sort of thing here. You've kind of got that sort of form, right? But let's remember we've got light, right? Highlight, right? Core shadow, reflected light, right? So sort of light there. We're going to hit the highlight, going down. We're going to get core shadow, then we're going to get reflected light, right? So again, we need that sort of core shadow to be representing where the form kind of turns, okay? And we're going to have that sort of highlight there. So just keep pushing that. Again, I feel like here is similar to what we sort of talked about before, right? We need to be able to sort of render with things. So keep going. I think that's looking good. Yeah, and it's just a matter of like persisting, right? You need to block it in to really sort of get everything working. Cool. So this is Alana's. You're seeing that sort of the rough mock-up, trying to figure out again what sort of values and things you use. So yeah, I think that's looking cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of sort of feedback because I feel like sort of, yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of looking good. These, these, what's going on with these? I feel like this is like, these are kind of tilted. Is there a, can you explain? These, like these lines here seem tilted, or am I just looking at like a different sort of line, or is that where you sort of you kind of had right, so you sort of had something like that and you just kind of transformed it. I get that. Check. I think it's like, to me, they look pretty good here. Yeah, cool. I mean, that's a decent way to sort of do it. Do you know what I mean? To kind of have it sort of there and then use that to kind of help block things in. Cool. I mean, it looks sort of pretty good. I think those things are just like distracting me because they're sort of weird. Cool. Yeah, I feel like this one again, it's tricky to sort of say, but I'm just like sort of double check those ellipses, right? This one seems like it's like a little bit sort of twisted. Right? And again, it's mainly a problem like if you mess up these ones, it's not going to be an issue, but this one is like right in the middle. So because again, there's a line here and there's a line here. I'm not sure exactly which sort of one it is, but this one feels a little bit sort of like a little bit sort of off. If that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a really good idea. Like, you know, if we sort of zoom out, I think you've got a really good sort of block in there of sort of values and how to handle that. That looks kind of nice and realistic. So yeah, I'd say keep going there. Again, realize the way you're going to make the metal kind of pop is to, again, sort of play up that contrast, right? So again, make sure you've got your sort of, and your sort of lights contrasted with your sort of darks, but yeah, I think that's sort of looking good. Again, I can't fully dig in there and sort of look at all of those things, but yeah, I think it's looking pretty good overall. Yeah, cool. But yeah, maybe a TA can kind of help, you know, if there are some sort of things when you get to sort of the, again, we've only got sort of the rest of the week really, but if you do sort of have like a clean sort of version of the sort of finished lines you're going to use, that might be a little bit easier to kind of see exactly what's going on there. But yeah, I think overall it's looking good. I mean, the end result of it is looking nice. So yeah, keep going. I think it's definitely on the right track. Just like double check those. Yeah, not sure, and I don't want them to be like sort of off or anything like that. But yeah, definitely going in the right direction. Cool. Here we've got Ella's and cool. So yeah, and I think with most of these, once we're at the rendering, I'm just going to focus on the rendering sort of stuff the most. Because again, I feel like there's always, you know, stuff we can always sort of fix about the drawing. I mean, the main thing here I sort of noticed, Ella, is just like sort of like if we sort of look at the shadow sort of here, it feels like this guy is like pretty sort of high off the ground. And that's why, again, it's good to put in the shadow sort of first. Right, and just again, remember this is going to sort of go through the center. right? And I think, again, we're going to sort of find that this sort of ends a bit more there, and that the engine is kind of a little bit more up here. Now, again, these proportional things are really tricky, right? So I'm like, don't worry about that too much, you know what I mean? Just sort of keep going and render and see how you go. But yeah, just keep in mind, like these proportional things are tricky because, you know, you can be like, oh, well, but, you know, that doesn't, it means that the engine's not quite big enough. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you got the measurement of like where this wheel is off, right, by like a tiny little bit, right, if this wheel is meant to be like sort of over here, this is not necessarily talking about yours, sort of Ella entirely, but I noticed a couple of people have made that engine thing a little bit sort of off. Yeah, if you get this off by like a tiny bit, you can see that, you know, that sort of gives you a significantly larger amount of room there, you know? So, you know, whereas here I'm like, oh yeah, now we can kind of make that engine a little bit bigger. We can make this a little bit bigger. And now, like, you know, the proportion seems to fit right. And that's because, you know, these subtle proportions of like, you know, how far away the wheel is from here are kind of important. And that's why, again, as you go through the process, it's important to kind of lock in some of these things. And also, again, just pay attention to like ground plane, right? Like how far above this stuff is the car, right? Because again, you might find that the body of this car is maybe could be just a little bit sort of lower, right? And so just small proportional things like that will kind of make a big difference. Now, in terms of rendering, right, I am going to say sort of very sort of similar things, which is sort of, let's see if we can get the sort of light, right, core shadow, highlight, right, reflected light, right, ambient occlusion. Let's see if we can get that kind of thing working. Here, again, I feel like we need to sort of do similar things, right? Is just make sure that we have that kind of, right, that structure there to actually render. Right, so again, just I'm gonna make a bit of a dog's breakfast of it, but getting that sort of structure there right, I think is important, because what's happening is these things are sort of flattening out, right? We're not having that sort of dimension to that, right? We're not getting that kind of, right, that sort of highlight under there, if that makes sense. Like we're not seeing the dimensionality. As much, and a lot of that is like, again, it's just sort of not constructing this, right? Because again, we sort of often imagine like, oh, well, it's sort of curved, I'll be able to kind of just fake it, you know what I mean? Like I'll sort of figure it out. It's actually surprisingly hard to figure that stuff out on the fly, right? It's much easier to kind of construct in all those concentric ellipses and to draw through, right, and to get that stuff all kind of working in the beginning than it is to, you know, just try and be like, oh, I'll just sort of see what happens, right? Typically what you'll find is you're thinking about other stuff. Yeah, and it's just going to sort of be very challenging, right? So, right. So just sort of adding some sort of structure there to that. But yeah, I think it's looking pretty cool. Keep going. Add, you know, get your sort of right. Let's just get those sort of core shadow things in there, right? Your sort of halfway to black, block everything in, keep going. Right, it's looking good. And yeah, again, like for everyone, it's your job to figure out like whether you want to fix that kind of stuff or whether you want to try sort of fudging it, or, you know, like how you want to handle that sort of transition, you know, from the line work to the color, whether you want to redraw something, totally up to you. Again, remember, we get another chance to do this next year, and really this is just you going at it, you know, like a Ferrari rendering really, and once you start to it could be plausibly sort of okay, but the trick is again understanding like
Hey,
how
Kim,
does the
can you hear
form
me?
go? You know what I mean? Like what's happening with the form here? Yeah, yeah.
You just dropped out for that whole conversation then. So
Oh, did I? Okay.
yeah.
Let me try go back to
Like only just the last 30 seconds, but you said something and then it dropped out and then you were still talking.
yeah, I might be back now. I don't know what is going on. I think
Yeah.
it's like
It's all good. It's like fine most of the time, and then you just like you'll be like, "Hey Ella," and then it will drop out for 20 seconds,
blah, blah,
and
blah.
you
Yeah,
clearly have
nothing.
said a whole conversation to her.
yeah. I don't know what I think it's because it's overcast and just nothing works when it's overcast. Because I'm either on my phone or the point-to-point Wi-Fi. Gonna have to get NBN. It's gonna happen. But yeah, I've gone back to the phone, so that might work. Anyway, keep going. It's looking good, Ella. That's basically what I was saying. Cool. Here's Ashley's. Right. You know, I think there's lots of nice sort of accurate drawing happening there. Right. Perspective seems pretty good. Again, you know, some of the forms are, you know, we could use a little bit more sort of ambient occlusion, right? So right, that will really help you if you're sort of trying to paint over these. Again, I think you could sort of push the core shadows. Same thing. Right. And again, let's just watch how we sort of render these things. Right. Again, make sure we sort of got our kind of highlight going across there, right? That we're sort of rendering that sort of form, right? That's what will really sort of help. Yeah, and again, make sure that, you know, this is where, again, it's sort of tricky, Ashley, because you've sort of drawn this star as kind of like just a bit of sort of like a two-dimensional shape. And this is where sort of the issue of like, well, okay, how do I render this? You know what I mean? Same thing here. We've got a few kind of lines in there, but like, what's happening? You know what I mean? Like, where are these things? You know, where is the shadows? Where are all those bits and pieces? This is where you've got to sort of go in there and sort of figure that out, right? So yeah, keep going with that, right? You know, just get the light, core shadow, right? Reflected light sort of stuff happening. Again, as you sort of render these, right? Make sure that you get that sort of contrast happening. Again, we probably need to connect these to something, right? They're kind of floating a little bit, which kind of looks a little bit sort of tricky. So yeah, I think it's just sort of push core shadow, right? Push the highlights, block things in a little bit more so that it's not just kind of 1, 2, right? But we kind of, again, push the core shadow, push ambient occlusion, right? Pick out the highlights and remember, right? To sort of, you know, render these things, right? Light's coming down here, it's hitting there. This, however, is sort of facing that way. So that's sort of going to be in shadow, right? So these sort of pipes that are kind of facing down, right, are going to be, right, a little bit more sort of in shadow. So just sort of, you know, figure out those things. that'll kind of help a lot. Again, you know, if you are sort of going to paint it over, right, get some of those highlights going. But yeah, I think it's looking cool. Lots of good stuff happening there. But yeah, you're going to need some more ambient occlusion there to sort of sell the idea of yeah, like if you're sort of not going to keep the lines in there, you need those sort of darker points to kind of sell the realism. Cool. So this is trees. Nice. I think this is looking good. Again, you sort of got the sort of crunchiness there working. And again, I think that's a really good example of just sort of getting that sort of basic sort of structure there working nicely. Again, that sort of Fresnel effect with the sort of light over there is working well. I feel like we could kind of, you know, push, right, render out these forms. But again, that's sort of not the most important thing. Right, but again, sort of same thing here. Right, it's kind of like pushing again, like if you sort of think about, like, you know, this is kind of like right in the sweet spot. The more you can kind of push that, the better. But yeah, I think that's looking cool. Again, lots and lots of interesting, shiny, crunchy kind of rendering, which is always good. But yeah, you know, just keep sort of pushing, you know, sort of highlights, you know, get some of these things looking sort of shinier. I feel like there's more shininess to be had, Tree. You can shine this up heaps more. Yeah, but no, I think that's looking cool, really good. And again, you know, because this is on like a dark sort of gray background, right? You're probably not going to have that much reflected light. You know, that seems quite sort of plausible. It's a little bit sort of darker. That kind of works okay. I'd probably play that into these pipes a little bit more. You can probably push the ambient occlusion there as well. But yeah, looking awesome. So let's just say, keep going if you've got more time. Again, you know, it's sort of fine as is, but yeah, there's some of those things, right? You know, if you have some extra time or you want to sort of push it, those are the things that I'd sort of do. Cool. All right, so this is Brontes. Cool. So yeah, I feel like this is looking good. They sort of, you know, keep going. Again, those ellipses are looking sort of nice. I feel like some of that stuff is sort of working. We just need to kind of, again, as I'm sure you're aware, now, well, I feel like the wheel, right? I feel like these wheels are a little bit sort of close, but it also could just be that sort of maybe these connection points are a little bit sort of over here. Just be 100% sure where those are meant to go, because again, they are sort of affecting like a little bit sort of the feeling of, right, like where is that sort of suspension unit on the other side, right? Like what is sort of happening? Where does that kind of connect? Yeah, because I'm like, I don't think that's that wrong, but that's where just the shadow might help, right? Just putting the shadow in there might sort of help define the sort of distance. Yeah, that would sort of really sort of help it there. But overall, I think it's like, you know, on the right path. Just keep in mind, again, I think you've done a good job of, again, finding this form and the structure in there. Just keep doing that to a lot of these sort of areas. You have that stuff that, you know, you can sort of render. Cool. So this is whose was this one? That one is different. So yeah, I feel like again we're probably gonna sort of. I'm not seeing a lot of like heaps of the sort of structure or sort of ground plane work. Don't know whether that's sort of meant to be there. That will help you. I think overall it's kind of like looking good. But, you know, right. Again, some of them feel like they're getting a little bit sort of wobbly. Again, you might actually have sort of been drawing them with that sort of tool, but again, this sort of line looks like it's sort of like a little bit sort of wobbly there. And again, like I just feel like, right, these kind of don't seem like they're kind of lining up, right? And here, again, I feel like these ones are just kind of being drawn, right? Right, so again, let's draw them with your kind of elliptical tool. Let's make sure they line up, right? So yeah, use the elliptical tool for those and make sure, again, that, you know, we're not just kind of freehanding those. It will come back to bite you, as we've sort of shown, right? Again, like, you know, making sure we've got all those structures that we're sort of drawing through, getting those kind of lips that will help us end up. But again, overall, I feel like it's kind of looking good. Definitely going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think like not even just for Ella, but for everyone, like when Tim was showing that Dragon Ball Z stuff, like that's what he meant. Like, so talking about Ella's wheels, like that's what he means by the consistency. So like in the Dragon Ball Z stuff, they can all be a little bit wonky, but they're all the same wonky. Does that make sense? Whereas yours, Ella, there, like the outside of the lips is nice and good and clean and crisp, and then the inside ones are different to the outside one. Does that make sense? So yeah, you just need to like keep doing the same ellipse, like and try to obviously like using computer. It's really good that you can transform them and stuff, right? And then just use the same sort of one. So yeah, but and try and use those little tools for how to do that. And also the other thing I will say is like, did you watch last week's class at all? It's totally fine if you say no, it's all good. But in last week's class, like I went on a rant for quite some time about this exact thing. So you've drawn your picture plane. So can you zoom out one little step, Tim? So you've drawn your picture plane the entire width of the cone of vision. And I was like, don't do that. Because basically what that means is you get like lots of distortion. So you're going to get lots of distortion. So try and draw your picture plane like really small inside the cone of vision, right? And just treat, so at the moment you've got an A3 sheet of paper, like that picture plane there that you've done. It's like what you've done is correct. See, this is where YouTube is like, fucks people up. I've seen so many videos where everyone, and Tim knows this rant as well, and he rants about it too, is like, I've seen so many videos where they teach, not so many, but there's videos where they teach cone of vision, and they show you all this, which is correct, but they don't tell you the application of like how to do it. So they're just basically like, this is how you do the cone of vision, and you do like the picture plane. It's like, oh, and then you draw your thing. It's like, no, you don't. Like, you nitwit. That's not how you do it, right? And they've got like 14 million views on their video, and it's like, you know. So yes, that's all correct. But what you want to do is you want to make, so that picture plane you've done, think of that as an A3 sheet of paper. You just want to draw that smaller, right? And then put your Ferrari inside of that, and you'll get less distortion. Yep. Does that sort of make sense? Okay. You got like 2 weeks left. So don't worry about that. Now, all right. Just carry on as you're doing it, but just realize that it is going to make it hard. So because basically like it's just making your measurements like trickier, but just keep going, all right? But it's just good to know that that's sort of, yeah. So like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you're saying like, how is the car body as well? And I think again, just I think the proportions are looking good.
Yep.
Again, just watch center line. You know what I mean? Just those sort of things. So yeah, I think it's looking good. I'd say keep going, but yeah, just stay on target, right? Just keep the accuracy there. Again, I think this one is sort of a different one as well. I think this is looking good though, right? Ellipses look good, right? Right, so yeah, Andy, I think that one's looking nice. Again, just watch similar things to what we said, right? So, make sure those forms are looking good and watch this center, right? The center is where I'm sort of seeing like the danger zone, right? So you sort of got the center here, right? But again, the more you can kind of understand and trace, right? Like what is happening, right? Like what is happening here, the better. Because I think what's sort of going on, right, is we sort of got this, right? Like that's looking okay, but how do these connect? And that's where we want to sort of draw through, right? We were talking about this last week as well, right? We want to just make sure, again, so resolve the form drawing of the car body, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's just like that, that sort of center line, just make sure that that's actually kind of where you want it to be.
Hey Andy, did you watch the video last week, like the class last week? So okay, if you didn't, I'm just like asking if you did. Yeah, so, because me and Duncan had a discussion about this last week, didn't we, about the center line? And like, so you can have a center line in there, right? And Tim knows what I'm going to say. You can have a center line in there, but you can also make up a bullshit center line that doesn't exist, right? So what's like a lot of money to you, Andy? Just tell me, what do you think is like a lot of money? If you had to lose some money, what would be a lot to you?
Would one Bitcoin
$100,
be a lot of money?
Okay, so when you do this, right, I want you to be like, if I get this, if I don't work out the center line, I owe Simon $100, right? Like when you're drawing it. Yeah. So, so we had this conversation, I was going to repeat this again because it's like kind of important, is that like, the TAs and stuff are doing like lots of drawovers and things, and it's really cool. And like, Duncan's doing a drawover stuff and he's like showing how to do the center line, and like, it's pretty close, right? It's like, yes, the concept is the center line and it runs down there, but like, if you don't have the center line on the ground plane, which you don't, right? I can see it, like you don't have it there. If you don't have that, there's no way of knowing where those things are in space. Like you're just making it up. So that's what Tim's getting at. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to like, Tim's explain it one way. I'm with good cop, bad cop. Tim's like, oh, you should try and find the center line. I'm like, if you don't get that, it's like, how? You can't measure that bit. Like the bit that Tim's drawing now, this is on somebody else's, right? Is like, how do you know the ellipse is even on each side when you just put in a random center line? Does that make sense? You're just guesstimating. You're just like winging it. Yeah. So try and like, I want you, Andy, to like try and just work out, because if you work that out, you're going to work everything else out, all right? Because then all of a sudden your whole drawing will like become structured, because you'll have to work out what's on the ground. You'll have to work out how far the wheels are apart from each other. Do you know what I mean? Like all of this stuff then falls into place. So I know Tim's been banging on, like Tim's literally been banging on about the ground plane and the center line from like week 2. But heaps of you guys just kind of get through and you're like, why do I need to do that? I don't need to know that. Let's just draw the Ferrari. And then you get into these pickles where you're like, so Tim's like, it doesn't look like the thing's in the middle. And you're like, no. And you can do it like, I think like say, because what I said to Duncan is like the way he did it last week, it's like 98% accurate. It's like, it's like really freaking close. but you don't actually know that's accurate, right? Because you haven't measured out like the where it's on the ground,
and then you
where
can't
the
use
central
it for other
point is.
stuff. You know, that's the thing, is it's conceptually like when you put it in there, you kind of remember where it is in your mind, right? And as you like mark it out, you kind of remember that in the drawing, right? And that's why, again, you know, if you sort of get a little lost, you know, often what you'll see me doing is kind of being like, okay, wait, where is it? Okay, the center line's there. Okay, that's there. That means this thing, it's kind of going, okay, I get it. I get where I am. I'm sort of over here, right? I'm doing this, yep. Oh, okay, yeah. So that's going to be over here, right? So it's not just like, oh, I need to use it to find it, but the concept of knowing where it is more accurately, it just trains you to think about like, oh, you know, when I'm drawing something, I'm imagining where the center line is. So when I do wing it, right, it's better, you know? And again, it really helps you when it comes to these like curved forms and stuff, right? It's so hard to just wing those. And again, when you're trying to render those, you're going to see the sort of compaction of those sort of issues. So yeah, I did a quick sort of, again, similar sort of things with Daniela's. I think
So it's like just on that, Tim.
stuff.
So just on that, really quickly is like, so I think where it really shows is like where people are trying to draw the ellipse of the cockpit. You know, the cockpit and the round bit, and like even if you just went through the process, was like I could draw a box around that, and then like as in just on the top plane, right? So I'm doing lots of hand movements,
Yep.
Tim. Like I could just like that. So I could just draw a box around that. Where's the box? How are you situating that box? Like where is it?
Yeah.
It could be anywhere. Does that make sense? But if you have that point on the ground where you can relate it back to, you know that the box is in the right spot. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of
So
conceptually
if I
hard
have
to get
that
because
center
it's like
line there,
it's a bit abstract, you know, because you're like, why do I have to do it on the ground to draw the thing that's up there? Right? But it's like it just helps so much, you know. Yeah, and then you can get all
so
these things, and
if
then your things won't look twisted or like kind of out of whack. You'll get that ellipse. Like if you just do it like the boat, you'll get that all working like really well. So you can literally just like Tim's doing now. You just draw on the ground, and then you draw your lines up, and there's away you go. And like you can't stuff it up. Does that sort of make sense? And once again, this is not just for Andy. It's like for everyone, right? It's just it's easy. You can just double check all your measurements and stuff. Yeah, it's easy. It's just a hard concept to kind of get. Yep, and the ground plane for the shadow.
Yeah, and the other thing is, people are often getting to the end, and they're like drawing the shadow, and I'm like, oh, but yeah, the point is, if you do all that stuff on the ground plane, then the shadow's like 2 seconds.
Just trace it off.
Yeah, you know.
It's like,
and again, when you're doing design, that shadow helps a lot. It helps a lot to show the form, right? Yeah, cool. So this
Duncan's,
is.
hang on, Duncan's got a question. If Andy doesn't have a ground plane now, what do you sort of like recommend how to fix it up? And I think, I think what's cool, Andy, is like I can see all the construction there that you've done, like, and all that sort of looking good. Right?
Which one's Andy's?
That one there, the top. Yeah. Duncan's like either one of them. Yeah. So like I feel that with both of them, with Daniela's and Andy's, like you've got all the construction there. It's just a matter of like kind of drawing it through and just, you know, fleshing it out. It's actually not that much you got to do to get that to work, you know, like, because you know where the center is, like Tim's just putting it in the middle of the nose cone. So like you're like, okay, there it is, and then like, okay,
that's there.
Where you're going to run into problems
Next
is
thing
like,
would be to find out where it is at the back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you need to find out like where the, you know, where it sort of is, and then you just kind of put that center line in, and you've already got your kind of wheels, right? So you can you know, figure out where your wheels are. That's sort of pretty easy, right? You sort of know where they are, right? You can sort of find that. You can, you know, even roughly kind of put it in the center of the wheels, right? So it's again, it's like it's not that hard to kind of go through and be like, right, you know, I'm sort of, you've got an idea for where it is. Again, you know, like figuring out exactly kind of where that is tricky. But I mean, hopefully we've sort of got some idea, right, where it is, because we sort of used those boxes to do it, right? I mean, I think it's kind of like there, right? Like that's kind of what you're dealing with, right? So it's sort of that one, like the yellow one is kind of, that's the bottom center line, right? But yeah, like the question is kind of where is this thing? Like the thing is, yeah, that's not quite sitting right, like at the front there. So yeah, you know, you just sort of go through again, find that sort of center, right?
I think Duncan's just asking, is there a way to exactly find that? And I think probably the answer at this point is like, not really. Like, it's just one of those things where you're like, oh, if I did that at the start, once again, this would have saved me lots of pain at the end. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you just got to kind of reverse.
The problem with doing this, yeah, you're like, you're going to spend a lot of time finding it, and you still might find like, oh, you know, I found it, but then more stuff just doesn't match up, right? So you kind of have to be like, okay, how am I going to sort of fix this? And you might find that it's harder, and you do have to really pay attention, right? Just a good way to do this is, you know, I'd say try and sort of draw it out and then block things in. So do like a quick block in of the car and then a quick block in of the shadow, and just see like whether it feels right. You know, that's the best way. If you don't have anything and you're kind of all wobbly, yeah, see if you can put some stuff, you know, underneath it. Because putting the shadow in will tell you like, does it feel right? You know, does it feel like, you know, the car's kind of, you know, it'll easily kind of feel like, you know, sort of, oh, there's like a shadow here, right? But the car's kind of like floating in space or something, you know what I mean? Like sort of casting a shadow, like it'll kind of feel wrong, right? You need to make sure it's kind of right. So yeah, but I'd say just, you know, find center of some of those things you've kind of got, you kind of got to find a few points that you're going to consider to be true. I think most people probably had some sort of center line in there to begin with, just a matter of sort of refining that. Yeah, but yeah, to a certain degree, it's like, yeah, I don't know what you do. Cool. So this is, again, Ellie's. And again, I feel like we could just sort of clean up the rendering a bit here. I feel like we've maybe just sort of added like a few too many of these highlights. Let's like sort of build the form first before we kind of add too many kind of highlights, right? See if we can kind of just sort of get that core shadow. Here you've sort of got some, right? So you've got the darkness, and then this is sort of getting cooler, and then you got these kind of like little sort of things. It's just feeling a little bit messy. Let's just sort it out. So we've got, again, highlight, right? Like sort of light, highlight, core shadow, again, sort of reflected light. I can see where you're going with it, but I feel like, yeah, it's not quite sort of showing that form, right? And again, remember, you know, we need sort of highlights, right, along the top. And again, right on here, that will kind of help, right? Just the more kind of contrast. Again, remember those metallic surfaces have quite a lot of contrast, right? Add that sort of ambient occlusion. There's lots of really good stuff happening here. But yeah, we just got to learn to kind of put in the darks, put in the highlights, render those sort of materials, right? Lots and lots of good stuff happening there. So I'd say keep going with it, keep working. I think it's sort of looking good. But remember, again, even with these, right, you want kind of on these pipes, highlight, core shadow, reflected light. You know, it's separate lines, but we sort of need to put that in, right? And again, sort of, you know, right, sort of darker colors in those kind of areas where you're going to find your sort of ambient occlusion, right? So yeah, keep going. I think this is sort of looking good, but just organize these things a little bit better. Try and make that a little bit sort of cleaner. That will kind of help a little bit. And yeah, just keep going, keep rendering. I think it's looking good so far. Yeah, cool. And I think this is, again, sort of Michael's. And again, probably sort of looking like, again, a little bit sort of cartoony with the drawing. And again, just that sort of like messiness, I think, is kind of hurting you, right? Right, so just like, again, you know, are we going to use the lines? Are we not going to use the lines? If we are, let's put the lines in. Make sure that's sort of consistent. Again, make sure we render that sort of form. Again, you know, work on your materials. Again, remember we want sort of core shadow, right? Again, this is right. That's not following, right, the kind of cylindrical sort of form that we're going to see, right? We're going to see core shadow, highlights, right, sort of running in a typical sort of cylindrical fashion. But again, lots of cool stuff happening here. And again, it's tricky when you sort of got, again, the slightly simpler sort of version of the Ferrari Dolphin, like, you know, add in all that rendering. But often what you're going to see there, Michael, is that, again, if you don't have the construction drawing to add a lot of those highlights, it's very hard to add them, you know? So that's a big part of the challenge you're going to deal with there. But yeah, I'd say, you know, keep going, keep working on it. And I think we can also refine shadow shape, right? Because again, it doesn't feel like it's sort of relating to sort of anything, right? It feels like you just kind of put it in there, sort of guessing, right, where it goes. But
So
yeah,
once again, just try and use that. Just try and use that grid, Michael. You know, like if you're gridding everything else up, try and use the grid for the shadow as well, right? You've already got it there, so just think your way through it and try and get it as organized as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that stuff is there. It's just a matter of, you know, going through, ticking all the boxes. Again, I forget whose this was, but again, I feel like that's kind of looking good. Keep going. Again, you've got the block in sort of working there, but again, just remember, we want to, right, you sort of got this thing, right, and then we've got the end, the sort of side panel. But again, remember, this doesn't go all the way, right? You sort of got engine here somewhat, right? And then again, depends which version of it you draw, right? But just keep in mind, again, the proportion, right? What that is kind of blocking in. Better off to block in these shapes, right? And try and sort of rough those in. Yeah, I think that's sort of looking good. Cool. Is this all? No, those ones are different. Cool. So there's a few more there. Again, like it should be somewhat comforting, right? That everyone runs into the same sort of problems. Cool. Hey, Samuel, how's it going? Yeah, so I feel like, again, I feel like the details are sort of working nicely with this. I feel like you're sort of making some good progress. Just, I think these wheels still seem a little bit off right there, right? We're not kind of getting the elliptical math quite right. This one looks a lot better, right? Like that sort of looks a lot more solid. This one just feels like it's too kind of squished and tilted. Right. sort of check. Check the math, right? Make sure again, that kind of minor axis stuff is kind of happening. Yeah, we can just sort of draw something that looks vaguely like that's meant to be there. And we can just kind of see, right, those don't look sort of symmetrical, right? Right, these all look sort of a little bit different, right? So that sort of seems off. Again, find center, find your ground plane, right, etc., etc. Find your ground plane as well. I think that would sort of help, but yeah, keep going, right? It's looking. Cool. So if this one, this is this one. Things that are going on, but again, I'm impressed by the complexity. Aaron, cool. Again, you can get all round plane looks good. It looks good. I'd say again, just sort of keep go. Right, and just am I still cutting out?
Yeah, cutting out again, Tim. I think I see why. This is. Box and that sort of chokes it up, and because it's raining, I think like the phone, yeah, stuff doesn't work that well. Cool. So again, so we've got sort of two rendering ones here. Again, Seska or Cheska, I think this is looking good. Again, rendering is looking good. Right, nice sort of highlights and things. Yeah, I think that's sort of working well. Again, you could probably push sort of the core shadow, right, reflected light sort of stuff a little bit more, but again, it's looking super shiny. Lots of stuff is working really nicely. Again, good sort of shininess on the rims, good material sort of separation. Yeah, so I think that's turning out really well. Again, we could probably sort of push, again, just push these basic forms a little bit more, right? Add some sort of ambient occlusion. Right, but yeah, really nice material separation and stuff. Yeah, cool. Well, it's looking good. Yeah, I sort of try and hit the core shadow, right? So you've got core shadow, light. Let's try and hit the reflected light, right? These feel like they're just kind of getting sort of darker, darker, darker. Again, if you can kind of pick up a little bit of reflected light around here, that will kind of really help.
But yeah, looking good. So, you know, again, I feel like, you know, it looks shiny, looks like it's working well. Again, you could just push the highlight, push the core shadow a tiny bit more. I think those would sort of work well. Again, the wheels feel like a little bit sort of squished in some places, but again, you know, it looks super shiny. Rendering's working really nicely. Cool. And I think this is lucky last is Marissa's. So again, I feel like let me know sort of what stage you're at here with this one, Marissa. I think this is looking really cool though. But yeah, just again, I would sort of say, let's try and make that sort of block in a lot more solid.
I think hey Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
I think Marissa's, because you spoke a fair bit about this one last week, and I think it's like a lot better. Like it's a really big improvement. There's some stuff that's looking quite good in there. So just
totally.
Just keep going with that. And I think just remember, just back to the spheres and cubes and stuff, when you're rendering and painting that stuff up, just keep it simple. Remember all your like unfounded gradients, you know, that Tim would talk about all the time, things like that. Like a lot of times it was like, make it more simple rather than make it more complicated. So when you're kind of rendering and painting, just try not to get it. Then you'll get away from like the real like smudgy looking paint in areas. Just really think of those like 1, 2, 3 reads. So just think of the planes, and you know, like the cylinder, you know, where it's the cylinder and then it ends, it's got a plane, and there's not much of a gradient on that. So the same sort of thing with the wheels. Just try and keep all that as simple as possible.
Right, just all those kind of things, right? Where we're kind of just separating those planes, just go through, block it in. So, you know, I feel like, again, you're probably used to sort of being more painterly with that stuff, but I'd say, firstly, again, having the core shadow, having the cast shadow there, right? This just looks like sort of a vague, that will help a lot, right? If you add that, it will just help to kind of separate things out. So again, it's a matter of sort of understanding how you sort of block this in. Maybe you want to sort of work with a more painterly style at some point, but again, block it in first, get all those things working, get your light, highlight, core shadow, reflected light, get your ambient occlusion working, just block it in, go through those steps. I think the drawing is looking, is a huge improvement, right? So basically work on the block in and getting halfway to black happening. I'm running out of space for that. Right. And again, I feel like once you do that, you at some point, Marissa, you'll be able to apply your sort of painterly sort of stylings a little bit, right? Add maybe a little bit of that to some of the texturing and rendering here and there. But again, just make sure you kind of block it in first, right? You know, get that kind of happening. But as Simon said, again, huge improvement. The drawing's looking a lot better. Yeah, cool. Keep going. I think it's looking awesome. And again, remember, as I've been saying incessantly, right? You know, make sure you understand the form here, right? Because again, understanding that and having that kind of blocked in will really kind of help you, you know, to be able to paint that, right? So again, just getting those kind of things sorted will really kind of help. But yeah, cool. I think that's looking good. So yeah, I think everyone's got a few shiny Ferraris there at the end of the day, which is sort of cool. And you know, as Simon was saying, it feels like probably you guys are getting smashed with figure drawing work a little bit more than people have in the past. So yeah, I feel like people are doing a good job keeping up with this. But yeah, that's all we've got today. I don't know whether I'm still lagging or not. You guys can hear me.
That's okay.
Let me know. But that's all we got. Yeah, cool. So good luck with your presentations. Keep working on these, you know, as sort of much as you can. because it is an achievement. You know, you will feel good once you kind of get to the end of this, and also we're doing the same thing next year, so you can't just be like, oh, if I just kind of escape this, it'll be okay, right? Like, nah, we're doing planes and stuff in third year, so it'll be the same sort of thing. More opportunities to get critique and again master this craft, which is awesome. But again, not so good if you're hoping to escape. You know what I mean? The torment of sort of technical rendering. So again, worthwhile really, you know, having a good go at this and seeing what you can maybe learn and pick up next year and, you know, move forward with this. Again, the better you get at this, the better you know, be able to do most things.
Cool.
Anyway,
Thanks, Tim.
But yeah, cool. No worries.
All right, and yeah, we'll see everyone in presentations.
Catch you around next year / in presentations. Keen to see what everyone sort of comes up with, because again, I don't get to see what people work on outside of their Ferraris, and I know a lot of people are like, some of their other work is a lot better than their Ferraris. So yeah, I'm keen to see that, what everyone does for final presentations and stuff. Should be good. But yeah, anyway, good luck everyone. We'll catch you around.
Okay, see you later.